Call to order this special meeting of Galt City Council. The date is March 23rd, 2016. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Payne?
Here.
Councilmember Hewer?
Here.
Councilmember Campion?
Here.
Councilmember Powers?
Here.
Mayor Cruz?
Here. Could you have public comment, please?
Under Government Code Section 54954.3, members of the public may address the council on any agenda item before or during consideration of the item. Speakers shall restrict their comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Please fill out a speaker sheet located on the table inside the entrances to the council chambers and forward the completed speaker sheet to the city clerk.
Thank you. Okay, under departmental, we have the workshop on Eastview Liberty Ranch Specific Plan and Annexation Project. Mr. Stewart, start us off.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Good afternoon. This is the workshop for the Eastview project, and just a little bit of housekeeping first. Because we've got 3 hours and we have a lot to get over through that 3 hours, I'd like to stick to the outline that you see here in front of you, which would be a brief introduction of the project and where we've been and got to at this point. And we'll go ahead and discuss the topics that were raised at the Planning Commission meeting. And what we'll do is staff and or the applicants will go ahead and give you, present the information, and then we'll go ahead and have the back and forth. Then we'll get into the discussion of the project financials, and then the CFD and the development agreement, and Mr. Rudolph will lead off the discussion on those two. And then if we haven't covered everything that the public had previously raised, which is through the Planning Commission hearings items, then we'll go ahead and receive public comments. So with that, I'd like to get going here, and just we're not going to give you a whole lot of project description because pretty much everybody I think knows about Eastview at this point. But just for the record here, the Eastview specific plan area is located in our northeast quadrant of our sphere of influence that you see there. The project itself is 504 acres, and that's the entire Eastview area, and it's broken up into 3 components. You've got the primary Liberty Ranch area. Oops, I'm sorry, wrong button. Really move fast. Anyway, the primary area is owned by, all right, well anyway, 338 acres is owned by the Liberty Ranch LLC, and that is the portion that's actually proposed to be developed in conjunction with this property. They also own about 17 acres just to the south of the railroad, which are leftover parcels, and they're not proposed for development at this time. And then the remaining area is what we call the non-participating properties, which would be a variety of private property owners, as well as the high school districts of Liberty Ranch and Estrelita High Schools. So briefly, we've done quite a bit of public outreach with the project. This application came in back in 2014. Actually January 2014, and then back in June we did a notice of preparation for the project's environmental impact report. We had a scoping meeting. We've had workshops with council and planning commission. We had a meeting or workshop with the non-participating property owners, which I'll discuss in a little bit more detail in a second here. And then just recently, this has gone through the Planning Commission, been vetted through. It was 3 meetings that the Planning Commission held on the item, and then just back on February 25th, the majority of the Planning Commission took action to recommend approval of the project to you, which brings us here this evening. And you'll see in your staff report the exact motions that were made by the Planning Commission and what their suggestions for the project were. We have several entitlements here. We've got an annexation because, like I said, it's outside the city limits, but within our sphere of influence. A general plan amendment, a specific plan which is required by the general plan for private developments wanting to annex into the city. We also require pre-zoning, and then we've got vesting subdivision maps and development agreements. With regard to the annexation itself, like I said, it's located within our sphere of influence. It's within what we call our Phase 2 growth area of our general plan, which would be our next logical growth area. Phase 1 would be the existing city boundaries, and Phase 3 is what we would consider later on. So this is Phase 2, and it is within our next logical growth area. The project does have to be annexed into the city, and the council would approve a resolution authorizing the annexation. We did have, like I said, a workshop with our non-participating property owners. We had about 20 members come to that workshop. It was last May. And with the exception of one maybe vote, everybody was in favor of being annexed into the city at the time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Sam Beltry, who is the project applicant, and Tim Denham, who designed the specific plan, and let them talk to you a little bit more about the project, the primary components, which will then be vetted out a little bit further with regard to those topics I discussed, and just also the various entitlements that are applying.
I have a question. This is going to be a city document, and I thought, as a city project, you're not doing the presentation?
This is the workshop, and so we're all doing the presentation here. But I wanted the applicant to discuss, for instance, why they are asking for the general plan amendments that they're asking for and whatnot, to explain their reasoning behind the application to the council here.
Okay. While we're off track for a second, I know that the school district is in the audience, and I didn't hear in your timeline that they're going to have an opportunity to speak, other than if there's time at the end of the meeting. I think I would, and I don't know about the rest of council, but I think it would be appropriate to hear from them. They've made the time. They've submitted letters of discussion, and I think we need to hear from them.
If I may, Mayor, as part of that timeline, like I said, there are several planning commission topics. Once we're done with this, just introduction of the project, we're going to get into those topics. One of those topics is the school itself. And so before we even get into the financials discussion, we'll go ahead and discuss that, and we'll give the school district their opportunity. Very good.
Thank you.
Too far, too close. I'll adjust it. Good afternoon, Mayor, Chairman, council members, staff. I am Sam Beltry. I'm very pleased to be here today. It's taken quite a while. I know that Tony went through the timeline, but you probably all should be aware that we purchased the property in 2010. As a matter of fact, one of my first meetings was with Councilman Campion when we were anticipating purchasing it. And we kind of discussed the general plan at that time. We actually worked on the project very hard in 2013 because before we could make an application, we had to study the plan and so forth. So we've been working very hard on this project for at least 3 years. And I think that it's been thoroughly vetted by your staff. I think that they've been very diligent in looking out for the city. As a matter of fact, I believe I've lost just about every argument that I've tried to have with them or debate. But nonetheless, we're proud of the project. We think it's going to be quite an addition both physically and economically to the city. And we look forward to responding to any question you may have and explain to you how we arrived at where we are at. I'm going to ask Tim just to give you a general description of the project from a form base. We won't get into all the specific details. We'll allow you to ask us any questions you want, and we'll use whatever information we have to try and answer that for you. So if you don't mind, I'll pass this off to Tim.
And maybe, my name's Tim Denham. I'm a principal with Wood Rogers, and we're the engineering and planning company that Sam hired to work on the project. I've been on that for a little over 2 years. Tony, I don't know if you want me to talk through the next 10 or 12 or 15 slides. Okay. So kind of this first one is it shows the existing general plan and what the proposed general plan land use and circulation diagram would be. And so the existing general plan had, a mix of land uses. It had 2 parks that were designated. It had MDR and MHDR. And when you look at the carrying capacity, the project established about 1,842 units of carrying capacity within this plan area. And then our proposed general plan land use and circulation diagram has made some adjustments. So essentially, we're using a specific plan which allows you to tailor your development standards and your zoning a little bit to use the densities or units that were allocated to MDR and MHDR into a single family product. And we felt that that would be a higher value both for the builder as well as for the city in terms of just the kind of product that would be, rather than the duplex or townhome type of density or units that MHDR and MDR would allow. The other thing we looked at is the existing school is located approximately about 200 feet from the rail line, and we shifted that to the east and kind of into the project a little bit further. So now it's about 800 feet away from the tracks. It agrees a little bit better with our phasing and build out of the project. And so this is the table, it's table 2 in the staff report that kind of shows the mix of land uses and unit allocations. As part of the annexation process, we have to pre-zone the property, and so the HDR, which was along Walnut Avenue, it kind of made sense to put it there, is going to be rezoned R4. The parks in the school are zoned PQ, public, quasi-public. The specific plan allows language for that to revert to single family if the school decides not to go there. The residential area within most of Liberty Ranch is zone R1C is a pre-zone, but with a specific plan overlay. So we have our own standards and within the specific plan define what that is. We've also designated the non-participants to the north R1C, and that would be the standard city zone for R1C. As part of the time, we also have 10 subdivision maps. We filed 3 different maps. So there's a large lot map that agrees with the phasing plan, creates 5 phases for financing purposes, so infrastructure can proceed. And then there is what we call a large lot village map, which establishes the villages or large parcels for merchant builders if they're to come in and buy. For example, one of these parcels here where we would have 65 lots might go to one builder, and another parcel here might go to a second builder. And then third, we have a small lot map, which goes through and details all the lotting within the entire Liberty Ranch project and exactly what size lots go where. And it's a pretty high level of detail. Oftentimes in specific plan they don't take it that far out, but in this case we did. So you can see exactly what's being proposed. We have a kind of intentionally a gridiron, kind of modified grid pattern of streets, which allows a good dispersal of traffic. We'll probably get to a slide in a minute to talk a little bit further about that. But pedestrian connectivity is really important when you're looking at air quality goals. We have the Devon and Galt corridor, which is kind of along the north side of Walnut Avenue, and we'll talk about that a little bit further in a minute. And so I think this is kind of a reiteration of what we covered before, but we're proposing 744 units within the entire Eastview Civic Plan area and 125,000 square feet of commercial. The non-participants kept their same designation in the general plan, so that commercial is at the northwest corner of the project at Twin Cities Road in Marengo. We also have within the civic plan design guidelines, and so while we are tailoring some of our standards with the civic plan with the goal of allowing all single-family detached products and having a mix of that, we also have infrastructure planning that you can look at kind of comprehensively your sewer, water, and drain systems, and then there are design guidelines to ensure a high level of quality for both the architecture and the landscape design of the project. And then these are some of the features that we can kind of go through, but the civic plan also details the phasing, the parks program, open space, and the landscape features of the project. Within the civic plan, and I do have to admit we have a typo here, but the LDRA is the zone that we're creating for Liberty Ranch, and so we have standards here. We'll get into this discussion a little bit further that deviate from what the standard city zone is, but it's its own specific plan zone. We have LDRB, which should be the same as LDRC, which is the standard city R1C zone. So this needs to be corrected with the going forward. That would be if you look at this LDRC, that would be the same as the RA, which was initially designated for the non-participants to the north. That was decided by the city. Just go ahead and designate that the standard R1C. And so this shows kind of roughly, shows the land use plans proposed for the project. And so the crosshatched area again is the non-participating properties. The HDR is located along the extension of Walden Avenue, where they have access to the open space and recreation opportunities. And then we have a mix of residential lot sizes kind of around that. One of the chapters of the specific plan is the circulation chapter, and a traffic study was done for this project, which looked at the average daily trips and the traffic impacts that were generated by the Eastview specific plan. We wanted to have a really kind of a modified grid, because again, that's that connectivity and dispersion of traffic. And we also looked at how these proposed roads would connect with the existing roads, which is maybe not fully explored with the general plan, but you want to, for example, Elk Hills Drive, you want to connect to that intersection of Marengo, because the number of median breaks that you'll be able to have along Marengo would be limited. One of the things we learned from the traffic studies, the traffic that's actually going eastbound on Walnut Avenue is lower than what was required by the general plan, so the street designation was downgraded from an arterial to a collector, and really it's just one travel lane each direction. That collector section has been modified, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but we've added a median to that because we wanted a nicely landscaped street. We also put a series of roundabouts, or actually traffic circles, within that street. Again, kind of create a dramatic landscape impact for the project, and also to slow traffic down. And so this is the circulation plan. We added to this the anticipated average daily trip volumes for each segment of the roadway along Walnut Avenue, because there's been some concerns that how heavily traveled is that. And so this shows about 10,000 ADT here at the west end of the extension of Walnut Avenue. But as you go further east, that declines as folks turn off into their neighborhoods and head to their homes. So by the time you get to the east end of it near Cherokee Lane, there's only about 1,500 ADT. A residential street typically, and maybe Gwen, you could help me if I get this wrong, but can go up to 5,000 ADT with a residential street. And so this is really functioning as a residential street with a big median in it as you go east of that second roundabout. We also looked at pedestrian and bicycle and alternative modes of transportation. And a key design concept in this plan was to, in addition to the 2 5-acre parks which were designated on the general plan, is to add to that some smaller neighborhood parks that residents can walk to within a few blocks and find some green space, and then connect those with a central pedestrian corridor and street connection, so that school children can walk along a local residential street to get to the proposed school site and to what we're proposing to be a more active park in the middle of the project. We also have bike trails that connect to Deadman Gulch to the west, and that's along Deadman Gulch here. That's the blue dashed line. We've proposed some private recreation facilities, which those will connect to that bike trail. And we've also proposed a bike trail along Cherokee Lane.
Unfortunately, I can't read any of this. I don't know about the audience, but I even have a copy here, and that's been difficult. I mean, is there any way to blow these up?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. I can't read it.
Yeah, these,
Like,
a lot of
these
these
chart-
exhibits are in the specific plan as well.
Yeah.
I apologize that it's hard to read it.
I can't read that.
Getting a light help? I don't know. In the parks, chapter 6 of Parks and Open Space chapter, we went through a calculation of the park requirement for the project, as well as for all of these two, as well as Liberty Ranch, and looked at an open space calculation. So I need to get them all that.
How did you come up with the open space calculation?
That's per the park master plan. It's 5 acres per 1,000.
That's what's recommended. It's not an adopted standard, though, I don't believe.
It's the document we followed when we were putting this together. There's also a chapter on design guidelines, or community design, which talks about, from sense of place, the architectural styles, and the landscape design and key kind of elements of that with, you know, within the document, you know, entry statements at Marengo and Walnut Avenue, as well as at the corner of the project. The Denman Gulch corridor, which is a multi-purpose corridor, has not only the recreational aspects of the bike trail, pedestrian trails. It will have water quality basins to pre-treat urban runoff. It'll have some private recreation facilities. There's two 1.5-acre sites there. The main channel itself helps provide flood protection, and there's an offline storage basin as well that improves flood protection within the area, so you have 100-year flood protection. So there's a number of elements or functions of that multi-use corridor. I guess I just said all that right here. Right. So, you know, kind of point out. So there's a private recreation facility at the first roundabout here, at the second roundabout. This is the extension of Walnut Avenue. This is the high school, obviously. The main drainage channel comes kind of north of that along here, and we will be doing some wetland restoration there, recreation. That also provides our 100-year protection. We have 4 water quality basins, 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the north side to pre-treat our runoff. There's a basin here that provides offline storage for the 100-year event. All this is going to be landscaped, and it helps to provide a buffer between the high school and the residential project over on this side. And the bike trail will connect across the plan so folks can get on the trail, and actually there will be a bridge that connects to the high school in this location. Chapter 8, we talk about phasing, and so we were anticipating about a 15-year build-out. You know, if the economy goes well, it could be sooner. If we have a slowdown, it could be a little slower. So it kind of depends on the economy and where it goes in the next 10, 15 years. But it would start. Oops, forward, I didn't mean to do that. And so we'll start on Marengo Road with the first phase, which there's Marengo Road here. And we'll be able to build a primary residential street that'll loop back to that first roundabout and then back to Walnut Avenue here. The entire site will need to be mass graded and ballasted, you know, at the beginning of the project, so that you don't have to move dirt across Denman Gulch when you're getting into your later phases. And then phase 2 is here, is in the green, and phase 3 is here in the kind of dark brown color or orange color, reddish color.
How many units do you have in phase 1, 2, and 3?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but yeah.
Typically, all of them were targeted for about 300. Some of them get a little higher. I think in phase 1, we're probably up to around 323, 330. And then in phase 3, I think they dropped down to 250, 270, something like that. But
I don't know.
Page 8.4 of the specific plan.
yeah, usually we target about 300 per phase. We try to have multiple product types in each phase. And each of the phases are designed to have their own circulation system 2 ways in and out.
Thank you.
Cindy's turn.
Correct. So at this point, with regard to the CEQA that was done for the project, we'll turn it over to Cindy Ganos, who is the city's EIR preparation consultant, and she can briefly go through the process.
Just quickly, we prepared an EIR for the project. As Tony talked about in the schedule, the first step in an EIR is issuing a notice of preparation so we can gather input from the public. The notice of preparation was issued in June of 2014, and we held a scoping meeting in July of 2014. Then we prepared the draft EIR and released it for public review from July 8th to August 21st of 2015. During that time, we were soliciting public comment, and we received 9 comment letters. So the final EIR you have is the 9 comment letters that were received during that public comment period of time, and the responses to those. The final EIR also includes a mitigation monitoring and reporting program that goes along with all the mitigation measures that are necessary to reduce the impacts. The EIR concluded that 10 impacts were significant and unavoidable. Those basically centered around aesthetics, traffic, freeway traffic, air quality, and noise. And all of the impacts that were found significant and unavoidable in this EIR were also found significant and unavoidable in the general plan EIR associated with build out in the general plan. So unless you want more detail, I'll stop there.
Okay, so before we go any further, did anybody have any questions with regard to the project description, CEQA, and whatnot? Okay, so as I mentioned, when we vetted the project through the Planning Commission, we had 3 meetings, and there were several recurring topics that came up. Those were the development standards, particularly lot sizes and setbacks, the front yard setbacks, street rights-of-way width and on-street parking, water infrastructure, as well as the well for the site, wastewater infrastructure, parks, and the consistency of the project with Parks Master Plan, and then the elementary school site. So I provided in your staff report a kind of a summary of the issues and staff's responses to that. So if any of those were dealt with in the staff report enough for you at this point that you didn't want to discuss them further, let me know. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and get right into discussing the development standards and the lot sizes.
Tony, what are you saying with that report? Is that this document?
No, that was the plan. The workshop cover memo that went out on top of all of that, basically. Should have received that as well. That was distributed, I believe, last Thursday, Donna? Last Wednesday or Thursday?
Yeah, it is. It is this one, this one. No, that's this document.
Probably your planning commission
No,
document
that's
there.
the workshop. That's the workshop.
It'd be the first few pages of that document. So, we go ahead and get it then.
They had no comments on the EIR or the development agreement, the planning commission?
We'll be discussing, not on the EIR, we will be discussing the development agreement at the end. That'll be the last topic we discuss here.
No, the planning commission.
Correct. So there was no discussion on the EIR itself, and then the development agreement, we are prepared to discuss that in depth with you this evening.
No, I'm saying, were there no recommendations from the planning commission?
The recommendations would be moved forward.
What discussion occurred, though? Was there any discussion?
Steve, with regard to the DA, there was not on the EIR itself.
Now, on the development agreement, there was no discussion. They came up right at the end of the Planning Commission hearing. The discussion was a couple of the commissioners wanted to continue the hearing to another meeting in order to more fully evaluate the development agreement. Majority of the commissioners said that they had reviewed it sufficiently and they were prepared to make a motion to move forward with it. And then a motion was made to recommend the approval of the development agreement without any further discussion.
What discussion, when we say any further discussion, what discussion occurred?
So there was, other than that, there was no discussion on any specific term of the development agreement.
On anything in the development agreement?
That's correct.
So, the issues that were raised by the planning commission, have those been addressed? Or are you just presenting them to us as these were?
The Planning Commission had addressed those issues, and the recommendations that the Planning Commission made are in your staff report there with regard to how they wanted to address them. For instance, with regard to the lot sizes, the Planning Commission had recommended that I believe it's 10 to 18% of the lot sizes be allowed to be less than 6,500 square feet as opposed to the amount that the applicant was asking. So at this point, you do have that information. Now,
Staff didn't address there, did not address any, staff or the applicant did not address any of the concerns raised by the planning commission?
at this point, that would require a project redesign, and no, the applicant has not chosen to redesign the project at this point to bring it back before you. So with regard to the first topic, which was the, again, the lot sizes and the setbacks, I'm going to let the applicant discuss the lot sizes. Primarily, as you heard before, the lots are being called out as low-density residential. However, the city's current standards for low-density residential lots are a minimum of 6,500 square feet. The specific plan does allow an applicant to deviate from the standards and set their own standards. It's a policy decision as to whether or not the decision makers want to allow that to occur. With regard to the particular lots, or the number of lots here within the Liberty Ranch area, and keep in mind this is just Liberty Ranch. The remaining non-participating properties would be would have to comply with the existing development standards with regard to lot sizes and whatnot. But for the Liberty Ranch specific plan area, I show you here basically the breakdown of the various lot sizes under 6,500 square feet and also above. We have a total of 448 lots of the 1,142 that would be under 6,500 square feet. You can see that those under 6,000 square feet would be 253, and then the remaining 195 would be from 6,000 to 6,500 square feet. Several of the villages, 3, 4, 23, 28, 29, 30, 31, which are the ones that are around the periphery of the area, for instance, along Marengo, along Cherokee, along Twin Cities, would all have lots that were at least 6,500 square feet or above. It's the interior ones that would have some lots that were smaller, as well as some lots that were larger. And I'll go ahead and let Tim and Sam discuss this a little bit further again, if they want to add anything further.
I have a question first. Why didn't we just use the existing zoning that the city had? If you have R2, you have R1C, why would we use those zoning designations rather than call a land use R1C something and then have it under the specific plan and have it really not represent what R1C is? I mean, it was confusing, I think, to any reader that everything looked as though it was R1C if you looked at the map, but that wasn't the fact. Is there a reason why we did what we did?
I am going to let the applicant explain that because I've also asked the same question and have made the suggestion throughout the project timeline that we do call the medium density R2, for instance. But I'm going to let the applicant explain why they are still wanting to consider the medium density R1 as opposed to R2. And Tim, I'll let you answer that.
Let me try and explain it. First of all, a lot of it is mathematics. I think you all know that a piece of land has a certain amount of ability to be divided up. And if you, for instance, put in a lot of large lots, then you either have to have a lot of small lots or some apartments, condominiums. Since we started off with the objective to have single family here, we did the mathematical geometry, if you will, to get the most single families at the largest size possible. When you talk about the labeling of the land uses and the zoning, I think that's where we're becoming confused a little bit. In our minds, your land use designation is very low density. Because if you look at our entire project, we're less than 5 DUs per acre. Now, how you want to zone it, you can refer back to your R1s, your R2s, your R3s, your R1Cs, Bs, and As. However, those also imply certain development standards, setbacks, floor area ratios, lot coverages, things of that nature. But when you work within a specific plan, you're allowed to modify that to do a hybrid or a better design as you view it.
But Sam, that's again, You know, the specific plan policies for the city of Galt say that it is the city that prepares the plan. Now, I don't know what happened in this case, but the general plan policy is extremely clear. You come forward with a proposal, the city approves that proposal, you deposit money, the city hires the consultant, and the consultant works for the city. I mean, that's what our general plan says, and I certainly hope that's what happened. Because if it didn't, it was in violation, or at least contrary to what our own general plan says.
Your general plan states that you do a third-party EIR?
No, it says that if you're going to do a specific plan, that the applicant comes forward with a proposal. That proposal is then vetted through the city.
That's correct.
That's correct. Then the applicant submits the money on deposit. Staff then contracts with third-party consultants to prepare the specific plan. That is the procedure in the city of Galt.
I've not seen this procedure.
Not to my
The project that
knowledge.
started
We're
before I came on board, but if Steve or Chris...
It's a general
Chris
plan
question.
policy. It is a general plan policy. And that's exactly
Policy
what it
says
states.
that a private developer has to prepare or provide a specific plan, but I don't believe that it goes into that much detail.
I think that we pretty much follow that policy. For the applicant to prepare a proposal, we have to prepare a design. When we submit the design and all the documentation to support that design, we also pay to have a planner, third-party planner, to review it, vet it, determine if it was correct or not. We met with staff multiple times to make the adjustments for them until this plan became what the city wanted. We then hired or paid money to the city to hire a third-party EIR consultant who then documented the plan, and we got to where we can get here right now.
Well, I guess what my concern is that the way the plan was put together, his planning staff will review the proposal and work with the property owner applicant to address any outstanding issues. That's after there's a list of things that were to be submitted. Once the proposal is accepted, the city will initiate preparation of the specific plan to be paid for by the applicant. Issues to be evaluated in the specific plan application shall include but not be limited to, and that goes through that. That policy was intended to, one, I think, ensure that the city's interests were addressed, and I'm not saying they aren't in here at this point, but I think at that point, the city would have been relying on its own zoning to come up with whatever the land use pattern is, which would have eliminated the confusion that we have today.
Well, Councilman, I appreciate that, and honestly, I don't care what you want to zone it, as long as the standards and the product type that we propose are acceptable to you and acceptable to us. So to the extent that you want to...
Then I think it should be what the existing zoning is of the city. That's what I think.
You mean designated?
Designated.
Whatever
Either,
correlates to our...
whatever
design.
correlates to it. If it's a 5,500-foot lot, then it's R2. If it's 6,500, it's R1C.
No, I actually, honestly, sir, I don't object to that. We've been dealing with, for the most part, on land use designations, and that's why I think I got into a bit of a debate with Commissioner Canal. It is a land use designation from our mind, very low density, the medium density, and so forth. You implement that through zoning, R1s and R2s, as you and I both are aware of. It could be, you could designate it that. However, you keep in mind that we have within the development, within the specific plan, development standards that in some respects are slightly different than the standard R1s, R2s, R3s standards.
They're quite different in some cases.
In some cases they may be. And that was the process of the city preparing the plan, if you will, because we design it, but they actually are reviewing everything. We're just really changing it for them as they see fit. But this is currently is my proposal, and the proposal works as far as we are concerned.
I'm sure it probably works for you, but I guess one of the concerns is that, you know, policy matters were made, you know, at maybe the staff level And there was no input from the planning commission or the city council.
Well, I'm not sure this is a policy matter.
Oh, I think it is. If you're changing what the designation is, or if you're establishing a land use designation to apply in the city somewhere, that is definitely a policy matter.
Well, if it's merely a matter of labeling it more consistent with what you as council members and commissioners and staff recognize in the city, the labeling is irrelevant.
Well, the labeling may be irrelevant, but it's the underlying standards and policies and regulations
Well, yes,
that
I
apply
do
to
see
that.
Yes, I do see that we may have a disagreement there. I do believe we have the right to propose those changes, and I believe we've exercised those rights and demonstrated that this works quite well and delivers a lot of nice single-family homes.
No.
I share some of Councilman Campion's concerns, because when this came to us back when we had the public meeting, yellow generally represents what was our low density. And so I think there was some maps that were shown and you had big poster boards and you're showing your maps, and it all looked like there was a huge amount of low density housing. And it isn't until the specific plan comes out and you start seeing the small map that you realize what's being designated as low density is really medium density. I mean, it wasn't, so I think that there was, on my part, a lot of misunderstanding when I first looked at that original hearing and was like, oh, they've changed it to a lot of low density housing, how's that going to affect our housing element, and had some concerns about that. And then when you go back and look at it, you're like, oh, this isn't low density housing, this is really medium density housing, disguised as low density housing. Because that's what it looked like, Mr. Meltry. And so, I mean, so then we come to today where we're saying, why doesn't the specific plan follow our general plan designations and our zoning code? Why did we make up a new zoning code for this development?
First of all, there was no intention of a misrepresentation. And again, we were working at the general plan, specific plan level of planning. So when you're doing a master plan, not when you're doing individual tracts, and you're doing a master plan, you commingle various different densities, product types, so forth, and you look at your general area and determine what's the average density in your master plan, your specific plan. Our average density is 4.6 dwelling units to acre. Now, when you go forward to implement that through zoning, and in this case, as Councilman Campion had said, that zoning designation, if you use your city R1, R2, or R3, it implies certain standards. But a specific plan not only allows you to move things around, but also to adjust the development standards. And typically what happens in these kind of cases is that there's generally a condition of approval or a comment, and it says that in areas where the development standards identified in the specific plan are silent and they don't address something, you revert to the city's standard zoning ordinance. But to those areas where you have in your specific plan specific setbacks, height restrictions, things of that nature, then the specific plan's development standards prevail. So that's, I'm not certain that I'm being that clear to everyone here. I know the Commissioner, Councilman Campion is a planning professional, but this wasn't intended as a misrepresentation. From a planning point of view, this entire project is under 4.6 dwelling units per acre. So it falls within your very low density land use designation. When you go to implement the individual neighborhoods within that, then of course you're going to find yourself in some densities being higher or lower. Now, I also want to point out that in all of our studies suggest that this is a single family neighborhood. For us to, for instance, label something a medium density, and I think your density range is 5 to 8. That would imply that we would, if we're doing single family at 8 to the acre, you're looking at 3,000 square foot lots, and we never wanted to get that small. If you are intending that 8 to the acre become a different type of product, a multifamily or attached product, that's too low for that, and that doesn't fit the marketplace here. So in reality, it was just, we were thinking we were actually being very explicit, trying to be very clear that we wanted to build single family. We weren't going to exceed your density ranges. We weren't going to exceed your total density, your total yield requirements, and this is how you do it. And quite frankly, let's just use some imagination here for a moment. Let's presume you wanted all half-acre lots. Half-acre lots would take up a huge amount of the property. Now, I have to achieve a certain number of dwelling units. How do I do that on a very small piece of property? I have to make lots really small, or I've got to put in condos and apartments. This was the only legitimate way we felt that we could get in single-family lots at a reasonable size. I mean, if you look at, I don't know if we in the slideshow we have the zoning map of the city. If you look at all the R2 and R3 that's floating around Carillion, along Walnut, and all those areas, you look at some of the lots that are in there, they're smaller than ours. But we did not want to get small, single-family lots. We wanted to get a reasonably decent size. I apologize if I'm not being clear enough.
Well, I think by way of example, right across the street in the northeast area, that was a specific plan. For R1C, it was R1C SP, R2, R2 SP.
Yes, right.
And that made complete and logical sense because the underlying zoning matched whatever it was. And the standards and regulations and setbacks also met what the code, the zoning code said.
Well, that may have been that developer's desire.
Well, the city did that. That was the city. The city undertook it consistent with the general plan policy and prepared the document. What you have here, though, is when you look at the general plan map and then you look at your land use map, the changes, there's been, I think, a loss of units to the extent that, and I haven't enumerated it, but you know, I know that on the high density side, it's not that, you know, you want one type of housing more than another, but we have an obligation under HCD to provide all types of housing units, and particularly affordable. And typically that is in your higher density, at least that's the way the state looks at it. So we have to zone so much land as high density. The amount of high density, I think there's been a reduction from what showed on the general plan map as compared to what is on your land use map. And I think, you know, that's a whole other issue that I think we need to talk about. But I mean, if you had looked at what the underlying zoning was for those land uses and use that, I don't think we would even be having this discussion.
When you say underlying zoning, there wasn't a zoning, obviously. You're talking about underlying land use.
You have a land use designation in the general plan for this area.
Mm-hmm.
The underlying zoning would be that which is consistent with that land use designation.
I agree.
And that's what I'm saying. Had you used that zoning, we wouldn't be having this discussion.
Well, that may be true, but you asked me for your requirements are to submit a marketing report, and I'm sure you've read the marketing report.
I haven't seen the marketing report.
And well, it was submitted. And if you read the marketing report,
doesn't mean we got it.
I have never seen, it's never been a part of our marketing report that says high density is effective here. Now, however, what works out quite well here is this. If the market should change, and a builder in a subsequent phase says to you, you know, I really don't want to build single family. I would rather do apartments and condos. You've got to come back to this city council and ask to do that. So you actually have every opportunity in the world to change this plan in the future if what I've done, according to all my studies and marketing reports, don't work. And I think that's a very important flexibility for you. Now, with regard to...
maybe on that side it is, but I think that planning staff is going to have to answer the question, you know, what does this do for our housing element in our next update?
Kurt, I'd like to let him finish so I can follow his train of thought before he's interrupted.
Sure.
Was that addressed in the EIR?
No.
Mm-hmm.
The housing element, and maybe it's a policy question, so it's maybe better for Tony to answer, but the housing element didn't specifically say this is designated as a housing opportunity site. So the housing element doesn't address it specifically. No.
You're absolutely correct. But being annexed, we would have to address that because it will be part of our next update. So it should be addressed.
I'm actually working on another project in a different jurisdiction that we're dealing with affordable housing issue. And what you'll see is the trend is not so much to build segregated, one-of-a-kind housing for people with certain income brackets. You probably understand that. What really is the process is to subsidize market rate mortgages for those who can't afford specific home prices. Because then you have a nice inclusionary mix of people and you don't alienate or otherwise ostracize people. When you do a project of this magnitude, we try to give price points at all different levels. So a 5,000 square foot home on a lot would be a bit different price point than a 55, a 6,000, or a 7,000 square foot lot. That allows numerous things to take place. It affects the market velocity, it affects the absorption, it allows people who move here as homeowners to just start out as young families to move up and to stay into Galt and stay into this area. So really, the question that I think we're having here is, should I have more apartments and condos? And I'd say no. And under that circumstance, to make this work and to keep it single family and not violate some of your density requirements or for me asking for more units, I've done this mix with those development things. I think it's a very fair, reasonable approach to getting single family here without going down to very small single family lots, which honestly, Councilman, would you have preferred that I designate some area R3 and put in 2,000 or 3,000 square foot lots?
I don't know that that's possible.
Okay, let's move on here for a second. Vice Mayor Payne, you had questions.
Well, I guess my question is for Councilman Campion. It sounds like in the beginning your question was about the way he was labeling, and then it got off of it. So was that your original question? Was his labeling in his specific plan versus our general plan?
My underlying opinion is that it should be consistent with our zoning, is what I'm saying. I don't think we need to create additional land use designations to accommodate special development standards when we just updated our zoning code, a couple of years ago, consolidated everything, put it together, and now we're going to make another set of regulations.
So then my question is for the city attorney. Is it normal when you do a specific plan to vary from referring to areas as R2 or 3, or do something a little more descriptive of what you're going to build, I guess?
Well, I don't know if I can answer what is normal, but what I can answer is that the developer has the legal right to present the application that he has presented, which includes a change to the zoning designation or the manner in which the zoning is described in the specific plan area. But it is certainly a policy decision for the city council whether or not you wish to approve that these particular documents that create this specialized zoning designations within the specific plan area.
So at this point, you're presenting your specific plan, and if we don't like it, if we disagree with it, if we don't feel like it follows our general plan to the extent that we want it, we have the opportunity then to say, we want more apartments. Not that we do, but I'm saying we do have that opportunity once we get through this. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, Barbara. What was the Planning Commission's thought on all of this? Because they've passed it all through to us. So apparently it's okay. Pardon me?
Page 5.
I know, well, I'm just saying it for the, everybody else brings up everything, so I was just bringing up what it was, the Planning Commission. They wouldn't have passed it on to us if they hadn't approved it. That's what the point I'm trying to make.
And I also wanted to add to Steve's response real quick too. I've worked for several other jurisdictions. This particular jurisdiction's only ever had two other specific plans. It's had the northeast area, which did follow pretty much the zoning at the time, and then they have the downtown area, which did have its own unique standards. Other specific plans I've worked on in other jurisdictions, the whole purpose of having a specific plan generally is to create development standards that are unique to that particular project under a master planning type guise. The other the other tool to use in the planning realm would be to have like a specific overlay zone for it. With regard, and which is what the application is before you this evening, it's its own unique set of standards. With regard to what the Planning Commission did, again, yes, after the discussion and whatnot, they did recommend approval of the specific plan to you. Again, they did recommend that it be revised to have about half of the smaller lots basically upsized to the minimum 6,500 square foot.
Wow.
And like I said, and that was, again, their recommendation. At this point, the applicant has not, again, redesigned the project. Otherwise, that would require quite a bit of delay and whatnot, but it again, depends on what the council ultimately wants to do and how you want to approve this application or not. Just the reason why I put this exhibit up here, this was one of our backup exhibits, was just to show you if we were looking at zoning and if we did call out the particular villages as R2 versus R1, you could see what the R2 villages would look like. The ones with the red X's are the ones that would be about 6,000 to 6,500 square feet. The ones going from about 5,200 up to 7,000 or 8,000 square feet would be the darker orange there. And then again, around the periphery, you'd have your minimum 6,500 square foot, of which would be your R1 lot. So I just wanted to show you how that would look if we were actually labeling those particular villages as R2 instead of just all R1.
So the lighter ones, like surrounding the school site, that's meaty, that would be what, R2 is what you're saying?
Correct. So you've got the lightest yellow around the periphery, working it here, and then all around here would be your R1s, which would be all minimum 6,500 square foot. These darker, these here would be 6,000 to 6,500 square feet. Technically, under today's code, would be R2. And then these would be definitely your R2 lots here. And then, of course, this would be the high density that has been in the plan all along.
And then the R2 on the general plan, can you point that out?
Be along this area here.
Just that one piece of property, correct? Adjacent
And the
to the school.
non-participating, which would be the same on this one as well. Right, so this would be your R2, and then this becomes the equivalent of R3, and then this would be your R4, your high density, which is what these properties would be along here.
So in response to Ms. Powers, on page 4, it talks about Commissioner McFadden recommended some specific modifications. Yeah, that only 10 to 18% of the lots will be less than 6,500 square feet. And then there's some issues about parking. Around this issue, they thought it should be changed from, what is it currently, 39% of the?
Right.
39 down to 10 or 18%.
All right, if there's no more questions on this, let's move on to the street widths and on-street parking.
Did we want to, real quick, I did want to ask if there were any discussion about the setbacks. That was the other issue that the Planning Commission had brought up. Where we are deviating here is that the current code allows for R1 lots to have front yard setbacks of 20 feet. However, porches and side-facing garages are allowed to intrude 5 feet, so be 15 foot. The applicant is asking for the garages all to be at least minimum 20 feet. However, the living area to come within 12.5 feet of the front yard or the front property line. So basically an additional 2.5 feet they're asking for if you were looking at, say, garage versus our current garage standards versus living standards. So I did want to bring that up to you because that was, again, another topic of discussion with the Planning Commission, and I wanted to find out if we had any issues.
So the utilities, meaning gas, maybe cable TV, they're gonna be actually in the yard. They're not gonna be in the streets, correct?
Generally, and Stevie maybe a little bit more, but usually we do have a public utilities easement, and they are usually about 12 and a half feet, I believe. So the buildings themselves would be set at least at that, if not behind. So it would not be built over the setback or over the utility
Okay,
easement.
that was my concern.
In the current regulation, you say porches and what else can intrude?
Side-facing garages. So if you've got a garage with you know, your elbow driveway,
Right.
that could be within 15 feet of the front property line, because you know, that elbow driveway gives you that additional parking area.
Are you looking for responses on this stuff at this time, or what are we doing?
I'm just, if you had any concerns, let us know. If not, we will definitely move on.
Okay.
Move on, please.
Garage would be set back to what we currently require.
Correct.
20 feet.
But the housing would come up, and we have a 12.5 foot
Correct.
setback
Right.
from,
Does-
setbacks from
The property line.
sidewalk or from,
Well, it'd be in
Sidewalk.
front of the property line, so it'd be back a sidewalk, basically. Right. Correct.
so the garage would stick out way out front.
So the garage would actually set back further. So we basically avoid what we call in the planning realm snout house. Where
Yeah.
You've got the garage up front, you see nothing but a garage door. This gets your living area up front, and then the garage kind of set back, so it's not so prevalent in the architecture.
So when you're talking about the driveways, you're actually talking about paved area. So it includes the sidewalk when you're calculating, or
No,
Or not.
it would be behind the sidewalk. So
20
you've got,
feet from behind the sidewalk?
correct.
Okay.
So you're allowed, that way, just like any of our other standard driveways, that way you can get a full-size vehicle off the sidewalk.
Off this, okay.
The technique is, from an aesthetic point of view, that you don't have a monotonous facade, and you have reliefs back and forth. And it's also to allow a car to park without obstructing the sidewalk with pedestrians. But there's also a nuance here. We generally like to give as much of the land in the backyard where people use. And the thing that we have never discussed is when we talk about like a 5,000 square foot lot, our depths are all much longer than the 100s. They're not a lot longer, but they may be 4, 5, 6 feet. So really, the lots are a little larger than 5,000, if there are 5,000, and take all categories, with the intentions of having a slightly larger backyard. There's also another aspect of that, and that is the closer you can get people to the public right-of-way, the more the people are sitting on front porches and interacting with their neighbors and so forth. So it's actually, when you're planning, we all are sitting here talking about physical planning, but there's a socioeconomic aspect of planning also, and this falls into that realm, where you're trying to engage the resident to know his neighbor, to see the people on the street and so forth, without risking safety, without looking obtrusive, and allowing all the other standards of parking and so forth.
Yeah, but this isn't porches that we're talking about. We're talking about the physical structure, which would be bedrooms, correct?
Well, not in the front of the house.
Well, that's what, if the structure can go within 12.5 feet of the back of the sidewalk, theoretically, you could have your bedroom, your TV room, your living room, your kitchen, for that matter, at 12.5 feet, correct?
That's correct.
So where do the porches fall in? I mean, are you saying these are to accommodate porches or living space?
After the setback has been applied, the builder has the choice of enclosing the space or making it a porch.
Right.
The porch would not intrude an additional 5 feet closer.
No.
So the closest any part of that structure could be to the front property line would be 12.5 feet, whether it's a porch or whether it's the actual building wall.
So it'd be either or.
Yeah, and I might add, by the way, that in our design guidelines, we set certain guidelines, if you will, for how these things should work. When the builder comes in with his specific product, your staff will look at it, and if they don't believe that it's meeting the spirit of the guidelines, the builder will have to come to you guys to find out if they can do that or if they have to make changes to their architectural building plans.
I wouldn't be inclined to make any changes on the setback regulations if they're already allowed to intrude an additional 5 feet to 15 feet. That's just my position.
Okay, we can bring that up in the vote.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on then to circulation. Again, this wasn't really discussed. The actual street widths weren't discussed in too much detail. The Planning Commission, they focused more on parking around parks. However, there was the discussion of whether or not the streets were going to be wide enough. And I wanted to show you through this slide that compare what our various street categories with minimum widths are for Eastview as opposed to our northeast area, and then also just citywide. And as you can see, they are all pretty consistent with regard to the actual widths out there. One of the topics that did come up was whether or not Walnut needed to be at basically one lane in each direction, or if it needed to be a multi-lane street, as it is to the west of Marengo. And the general plan calls for one lane in each direction, and our traffic study also supported that. Again, we discussed earlier that because this is basically at the end of the line, whereas west of Marengo it's not the end of the line, and also because we will have several entries and exits out of this project, not only Walnut, but you'll have Liberty Ranch going up to Twin Cities. There will be ultimately, with build out of the entire Eastview area, 2 other intersections onto Marengo, and then of course the one out to Cherokee. Traffic can disperse, and so again, Walnut wasn't deemed necessary to have Walnut be ultimately a 4-lane street. Instead, it'd be a 2-lane street.
Go ahead.
Does this take into effect the future of having Walnut as an overpass? I mean, recently we just, it's okay. Recently we just designated Walnut to maybe have a major overpass.
It did. I'll let Gwen, our traffic engineer and expert, to speak to that.
As part of the general plan, the interchange was included in the circulation element. The Walnut interchange actually was included in the 20-year traffic study, so it was taken into account.
On Walnut, if I understand it correctly, there's parking allowed only on the south side currently, or that is what is proposed?
That is what is proposed, correct.
Are there bike lanes also included on Walnut?
There are, and on both sides. Okay. Basically, the discussion with regard to parking, not only along the north side of Walnut, but also around the parks, was that, again, this is supposed to be a pedestrian-oriented community, and so the idea of having people drive to a park versus walk or bike to a park was the reason why parking wasn't proposed all the way around some of the parks along the north side of Walnut. In addition, because the Galt improvements are supposed to be the focal point of the project again, having cars parked along there would take away the aesthetic value, or at least a lot of the aesthetic value of having the Galt improvements there. So for this reason, it was determined to not have parking along the north side of Walnut.
To me, it doesn't make sense, because you limit the access for those people that have to have vehicles. I mean, what do you do in that case?
I might be able to help you out there.
Well, I mean, it still just makes, this would be the only park next to a major street in Galt that wouldn't have parking. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Families drive to a park. They don't all bicycle.
We agreed to have off-street parking. We agreed to provide off-street parking on that side.
There should be on-street parking, I mean, to make it convenient.
That would be a matter of opinion, sir, because if you're driving down the street and you're looking at Dead Man's Gulch on the west side of Marengo, you don't park on the street, but yet the green belt comes right up to the street edge. We wanted to continue that look so we could do a natural look, and we didn't look like we had a bunch of reflective metallic cars parked all along in front of it. So we provided some off-street parking.
I can understand your visual concerns, but I think accessibility would outweigh that. only because it makes, I think, sense to me that you should be able to park next to wherever your destination is. You know, not everybody bicycles. I mean, not everybody is able to walk. You know, you have people that have disabilities. To me, it just, I don't get it.
If you calculate the number of street side parking that you're speaking of, you'll find that the off-street parking will satisfy that. You also find out that it's a safer parking arrangement, and it also gets you in an area in which, if you have parking bays that are 18 to 20 feet long, you might find 3 people parking near a spot where the activity area is at, and 8 people not. Whereas if you're in a off-street parking, and the off-street parking is well placed, as we believe ours is, you'll have people closer to the activity area. So for those who are handicapped or otherwise immobile, they'll be closer to where they're going. Keep in mind that the entire corridor of Dead Man's Gulch is not one big park. It's both visual, bike path, and passive play areas. So you would not want to, just like Dead Man's Gulch is on the west side of Marengo. As a matter of fact, along the west side of Marengo, Dead Man's Gulch is shrubbery right up to the sidewalk.
So that concludes my discussion of this particular topic.
So you're going to have off-street parking for the park area there?
Where's that located?
I didn't see that.
So those would be located, the off-street parking would be located within those 2 private recreation areas. Each one would have a parking lot there, basically on the north side of Walnut, coming off the north side of Walnut.
Is that private parking then as well?
I was going to say, is the parking open to the public?
We conceded that at the planning commission hearing.
Great.
And
Sounds good to me.
how many parking spaces are we talking?
I think we haven't done a specific design, we've given you a conceptual design, and I think as we get closer to preparing the plans, we'll do that, and of course your staff will see it, so you can make a calculation.
Yeah, I'd personally rather be parking close to the park off the street than on the street.
You
Getting
can't-
my kids
you
in
wouldn't-
and out.
You wouldn't be allowed in that park though, because it's private.
He just said it wasn't.
You can park there and go into the open space, you can't go to the park.
Well,
That's not quite accurate.
okay, but off the street to me is better than on the street, trying to get your kids and everybody.
Okay, so moving on, 2 of the other topics that came up there, they're fairly related, are water and wastewater, and I'm going to turn that over to Public Works, our experts with regard to both of those topics.
All right, I'm now formally an expert. There were a couple of questions raised, and the obvious questions are, okay, where's all the water going to come from? Where's all the sewer going to come from as far as capacity? And as part of a normal review and conditioning, we believe that the proposed conditions will assure that we have a good basis as far as permanent underground infrastructure to serve water, sewer. They talked about their 100-year flood protection and storm drain designs using Dead Man's Gulch as a feature within the open space area for storm drainage. They're going to be required to have looped water systems, and water, it already exists on their western boundary on Marengo. They would complete the north-south Marengo leg within their frontage area, and would also then put in the backbone as phases require to serve out the build-out of the subdivision, including a perimeter 12-inch sewer or water loop as shown on this slide. I realize it's hard to read. So zooming in kind of, they are dedicating, or if approved, would be required to dedicate a well site. That's the W in the lower left-hand corner there. And originally there was discussion whether we would have them build a well or just dedicate the site. And the staff consensus and direction to the developer was we would prefer that they complete the dotted black line there, which is a raw water supply line that would go from the water treatment plant down to the existing water treatment plant near Carillion, which is where we would treat for iron and manganese and, if necessary, arsenic. Although a new well we would hope would be a deep well that would avoid the potential for arsenic, but that's a future discussion. So in looking at where the city might when we might need that well. Building a well up front, if we don't need it yet, just means we now have to permit it and test it and maintain it and monitor it on a daily basis. And if it's not yet needed, we would rather defer that until the well is foreseeably necessary to meet the city's needs. And in fact, we are planning within the next 3 years, as part of our arsenic rehabilitation project, likely will be another deep well, and we think it would currently better serve the city, not at this initial time to be at this location, since this is not very far east of the existing Golden Heights deep well, which is providing a voluminous amount of water for the east side of the city. We would probably prefer to use the developer impact fees being received from the building that's underway now and put that in on the west side, so we have redundant deep wells on each side of 99. That takes some pressure off the having to push water from one side of town to the other to meet fire flows, et cetera. And so we have suggested and conditioned that the developer, in lieu of building the well site now with phase one, that we would dedicate the well site, complete the raw water line so that we have a finished ability to move water to water treatment sites, and then that they in lieu would pay their connection fees, which the city could then use at whichever well site at whatever time the city's best interest, and the city would take over contracting to build that well. It would be built for our standards. That is essentially a plan for providing water. Now, that would be for the early phases. As they begin to reach maybe phase 3 or 4, we would be looking at it annually, seeing how many permits are pulled, looking at how our water production is, what our other demands are our current wells continuing to meet supply needs. And at such point as we thought we were within a year or two, that's about the timeline it takes to develop a new municipal deep well. And that would be when we pull the trigger on taking developer fees and siting the new well.
So the reason not to build it now is because you have sufficient supply from the Golden Heights well, is what you're saying?
That is a major new producer. When we last came to you several years ago, it was for some urgency approval to contract for rehabilitation. We had 4 of 8 wells down or needing rehabilitation, and that was going to cripple our ability to meet our historic peak demands during July, August. We have since rehabilitated those 4 plus 1 more, and we're currently able to produce approximately 150% of historic peak day. Okay. Now you layer on that we're at 32% reduction. We're actually at 15-year lows and have ample capacity for the next 3 to 5 years with existing wells. But then I thought, didn't you say that is the proximity a concern with the 2 wells in terms of distance between them? It is not immediately a concern. It would be another reason why this might not be our next deep well. We might want to balance that further west. I guess my point is, if it's not now and it's maybe, and then you do one later, when would you ever come back to this site? I mean, is this the right site, is what I'm getting at? It is a good site, and the reason is because if we move somewhere farther east, we're getting farther from our wastewater treatment plant. Those are $5 to $10 million facilities that have some excess capacity. If we move farther away, then we either have to extend this raw water line much farther east, or we have to build a new water treatment plant. It is economical to keep it. This is approximately, I'm going to guess here, I haven't scaled it, I would guess we're at least a half a mile away. My point was, we have a deep well on the east side in near proximity, and I would recommend that we look west of 99 for our next deep well, and that would best serve the city's short-term needs. And what level of confidence do you have that the fees collected are going to offset the cost for the city to put that well in? I have a modest comfort level that the city's current impact fees and connection fees would be sufficient, but we are embarking on within the next year, we are going to be having a consultant review and, if appropriate, bring to council proposed revisions to our water, sewer, and storm drain fees to make sure that they're adequate as this type of development would be coming for you. See, that's a whole other reason, and we know the fees aren't going to be going down. They're going to be going up. So I guess I'm concerned that we're not requiring the developer to put it in. I understand there's some maintenance issues,
And maybe he doesn't put it in first phase or second phase, but maybe he puts it in third phase. But I think the requirement should be on the developer, not on the city, because then the risk is also on the city that we haven't collected sufficient funds over the period of time in order to construct what facilities are needed. So I would not be, I would be more inclined to say, don't build it now, build it later. I mean, that's certainly an option, isn't it?
I'm not sure what I heard is what you're saying. You would think would be better to build it now?
No,
or not build
what
it?
I'm saying is that I don't think the city should build it. I think with the uncertainty on the amount of fees that are being collected, I think it's better to, as has happened in the past in most cases, have the developer install that well and construct it.
Okay, 2 points. This is my professional opinion, and I've been doing water system work for 33 years. I have seen developer-built wells, and I have seen wells developed under municipal guidance, and I would prefer to have control of both the quality control and selection of contractor and putting the plans and specs together. And even though if a private developer builds it, we can review and approve those plans, that we would be looking to make sure, and some of the concerns earlier was, well, if they did the plan, then how come the city isn't watching out for his interests? Well, same thing would extend to water. I would prefer that the city be writing specifications and be in control of construction of the well. If there are problems encountered during construction, we can address those rather than find out after the fact, because a well drilling operation is typically 24/7 until it's completed and cased, and a lot can go on in the middle of the night. And so that's one thing. I am confident.
And I agree with that.
I am confident
agree with
that our fees that are paid by this developer and others will be sufficient when we complete our study, presuming that the council approves the recommended fees. And then there's always tension over, well, do we want to be developer friendly or whatever, but the plan is to fully mitigate the impact. That would be to set the fees as necessary, not only to do this, but future water treatment upgrades, and any main extensions that are needed as part of our master plan for city build-out. That'd be all developers, and they'd all pay their proportional share. So I'm confident that before this developer is pulling permits, that we will have a review and either determine the fees are adequate or determine that they need to be revised, and we'll bring that to you before they're in a position to pull those permits. Secondly, even if they got year one going sooner than planned, how many permits is that going to be, 50 or 100? That's not going to be the tip point. So I'm confident that if council, is supportive of the recommended fees, that they will be adequate.
All right, I'm going to throw you a different curve on that one. Right now, the reason why we sank the deep water well at Golden Heights is to reduce the amount of requirements for arsenic and manganese and such, correct?
Arsenic primarily.
Okay. What's to stop us from sinking another deep well, number one, to even reduce that more? Reducing the amount you're going to have your ratepayers paying as far as dealing with that. Number two, you're saying the west side. How far does that deep water aquifer, is it tier 2, I think is, tier 2 aquifer, how deep does that go as far as to the south?
We've done test holes. Certainly Golden Heights, we not only did test holes, but we've done completed well there, and it's producing phenomenally well and good quality water with well below standard arsenic levels, which is very low.
And it's the same aquifer that we're dealing with?
Yes, and we've done a test hole at Cost well site, and it's shown that same aquifer is there, and where we'd be probably looking next, there's a couple of sites that both have water treatment nearby, is either industrial on Live Oak, just near the railroad tracks there, which has an existing water treatment plant, and a high arsenic well. We would probably decommission that and sink a new deep well and take advantage of the treatment plant that's there as one option. The other is our Gateway has water treatment, and up as a poor volume production, we'd look to sink a new deeper well and decommission that well.
And I thought that's what we were doing all along with the deep water wells, was to slowly but surely decommission the shallow wells.
That is likely the best plan for the city. I think I mentioned at the very beginning that within the next 3 years, we're planning another deep well. That will be to meet the arsenic requirement at the wastewater treatment plant. Right now, the water system has naturally occurring low levels of arsenic in it. We have to treat it and remove it. Well, where's that leachate going, or, you know, from our filters? It's currently being backwashed into our sewer plant with the thought that that will be removed as solids. Well, that is not having the desired effect. So the goal here would be, all right, rather than continue what isn't working to meet our current discharge requirements, would be, let's not put it in there in the first place, let's get rid of it.
I was gonna say the backwash basically got the kibosh from EPA, if I remember correctly.
Oh, it's allowed on the water side, but it's creating problems on the sewer side.
All right, thank you.
And a new municipal deep well is probably going to be in the $2 to $3 million. These are significant size wells, 100 horsepower pumps, and all the pumping plant and piping that would go with that. So it's a significant endeavor, but again, that's what we would be looking to set our developer fees to cover.
All right, thank you.
So moving on to sewer, similar discussion. The developer will be tying into a sewer extension here and then extending sewer mains up and east into the project to serve it. The discharge at our existing Golden Heights, Vintage Oak lift station, I better get it right because it's across the street from the mayor's house, is sized for future growth in the area, and it would require either installing larger pumps in place of the current pumps, or we have existing bays as the east area of the general plan builds out. So a requirement on the developer is to analyze and propose a plan to upsize the pumping capacity. From there, the force mains downstream over to the Live Oak lift station and out to the treatment plant are sufficiently sized for complete build-out of this, as well as other planned developments. So the trick would be to sufficiently size and collect the sewer within the development with normal sizing, and then to extend through the outfall that is going in with with River Oaks. They're already putting some of the backbone in, and the developer is required to complete that and tie it into their system, along with additional pumps and controls at the Vintage Oak lift station. So just zooming in a little bit, and Vintage Oak lift station is shown on the wrong side of Carillion pictorially here, but this was just to give you a concept of where things were going. Capacity of the treatment plant is currently at about 75% of design. Now that's using not our current flows, which with the drought condition of 32% reduction, which we don't necessarily think is a permanent reduction. If drought restrictions are lifted, we expect that there would be some bounce back in in-wall use in addition to outdoor use. But the in-wall use drives the sewer capacity. And that 75%, typically at about 85%, we would have to submit a conceptual plan to the state. That's not a design for a wastewater treatment plant expansion, but it's to tell them what would need to be added and what the estimated costs are and what the timeline for designing that and constructing that would be, so that you would have that online before you reached 100% capacity. Right now, using several different estimations of growth rates, our permit requires us to annually take a 4-year outlook, and when we believe that we are within 4 years of meeting build-out capacity, we have to submit that plan. Right now, we think we have 4 to 6 years of capacity available at estimated growth rates of up to 250 units a year, which is double what we're currently doing, before we'd even need to submit that plan, which would then give us 4 years to begin bringing online additional capacity. We give a master plan for what that next increment to 4.5 million gallons a day from the current 3 million gallons a day. So we already know conceptually what that next expansion would look like with conceptual cost estimates. Again, as with water, we're going to be looking at our sewer connection fees, building those horizon costs in, which would be the next development, be 100% on the backs of new development as far as connection fees, and looking to set the fee appropriate to recover costs proportionate share costs from each development that occurs toward building that next plant. Now, we won't have the entire $12 million in the bank. You seldom do, because you're building up capacity for the next, say, 20 years when you do that. So you don't expect any one development to pay the entire freight to do that. You would look to collect that, get a pot of money to get started, and then borrow the incremental amount and pledge your connection fees to finish that. There are also other financing tools available to municipalities, but that would be the plan. So we believe that there's plenty of capacity for the next 4 to 6 years for all foreseeable development that we see on the horizon. Now, things can walk in the door tomorrow that are game changers, but we don't see the market to drive more than, on average, 250 units a year for the next 4 years or so.
On that subject, you say foreseeable projects. Last fall, we asked staff to submit an application to LAFCO to annex lands north of Twin Cities Road, as on both the east and west side of the city. And I know we've been in discussions with Delta College and have, indicated to them we'd provide sewer service to them. As part of the EIR, I looked through and I did not see some of those items identified under the cumulative impacts analysis, particularly as it related to wastewater. So I'm wondering, and I know we had a brief discussion on this, but that application was we gave staff direction last fall, so it's a reasonably foreseeable project. It's just a matter of time. And so I'm wondering where we are on that and why that wasn't included in the EIR.
For the city-initiated annexation, that's part of general plan build-out, so that is included in the master plans.
Master plans, but I'm talking about the project EIR.
So it was part of general plan build-out. We didn't specifically say the city is initiating an annexation, but it's already been addressed in the general plan under general plan build-out, so we didn't need to incorporate any additional analyses for that.
Okay. Even though there are specific projects, because there was a project list in there of specific projects.
For the utilities, it was based upon the utility master plan, and the utility master plans look at build out of the general plan, and that annexation area was part of those master plans.
And Delta College,
Delta College is speculative.
Yeah.
From a CEQA perspective, until I have an application, I don't know what to analyze. So that was not in it.
Okay.
And, Councilman, we have to annually do a 4-year outlook based on current conditions, and every year we have to take another look under our permit requirements. And when we believe that we are within 4 years at proposed or planned growth rates or foreseeable growth rates, then we have to initiate this plan to expand the plant. And so it really becomes a timing game, and we're looking at that annually as a requirement of our permit and what our current flows are and what our planned growth rate are. Now, we're using probably with what new development under the latest green building code, which is restricting even further water conservation in the walls of what is required. Our projections are still using 300 gallons per dwelling unit equivalent. And probably, unless they're very large homes, the average today that we're seeing is probably more like 200. So we think there's quite a bit of conservatism built into our current projections. But again, we've got 4 years to react, and we believe that we're already permitted to go to 4.5. We would just need approval of plans and a financing plan to move to that next level, that we could, within 2 to 3 years, have that capacity online. So that's sort of how the state views it, is it'll take you 3 to 4 years to get capacity online. So 4 years ahead of your projected need, you have to submit a conceptual plan of how you're going to do it and a schedule for when you're going to do it.
Hey.
Yes, understand this fee. So when you do fee structure, you will look at the fact of this development paying for their capacity that it's going to. I mean, so 1,700 homes They're going to figure out what amount of water and waste sewer treatment plant capacity they're gonna need for this. And those fees will be structured so that this development will pay for itself, and the existing residents are not going to end up paying for the expansion.
Yes, and so how that works is we look at our master plans, which were developed in 2010 for water, sewer, and storm collection and distribution, and then just in 2013 for the wastewater plant. It's our newest plan, and we look at what is needed to build out that infrastructure, and use those cost estimates, which are planning level estimates, and we divide that by the estimated equivalent dwelling units, and that becomes your per dwelling unit connection fee.
One of the principles of the general plan was that new development will, pay for itself. That the existing residents who paid for all these expansions of the water treatment plant, who paid for all of the expansions, are not paying for expansion for a new development.
That's correct.
And the routing system and everything here is consistent with the master plan, because there was nothing planned to go down Twin Cities Road, because at one time I thought that was going to be a conveyance system for the wastewater treatment plant.
There will be a main, for instance, north of Twin Cities, they will have to put in a line on Twin Cities Road, but that is not for the master plan. What you see up here is what essentially, now, as you move roads around, the master plan is a conceptual kind of stick figure of how you serve this area, and you obviously...
But Vintage Oaks was designated as the lift station?
Yes.
Okay.
And was, the lift station wet well was sized to be able to upsize and add pumps and upsize pumps. The discharge is sized to handle full build out of that lift station.
Moving on to our next topic, which is the topic of the on-site elementary school. The general plan calls for a 10-acre elementary school site in the project area. The applicant is proposing an 8.9 acre site. However, the general plan also calls for a 5-acre park adjacent to the school, though it doesn't necessarily say that they have to be shared facilities. In this case, the applicant is proposing a 5.2 acre park immediately south of the school site, which would be shared, and the city is in discussions, our park district is in discussions with the school district and the applicant to make sure that that happens. This is, again, an example or a sample of what the specific plan calls for with regard to the school. The location, as was brought up earlier, is actually a little bit further away from the railroad track, a little bit further north of it than what the general plan called for. And it was reoriented to serve about 85% of the overall project students, not only Liberty Ranch, but the entire Eastview area, within about a half-mile radius. So that way it promotes the walkability. Throughout the process, starting with our response to the scoping meeting for the EIR, and then in response to the draft EIR, and then subsequent to that, the school district has repeatedly provided some comments and some concerns with regard to the proposed facility and also the funding of it. You've received some correspondence from the school district recently. We also put, where the applicant had put a response to that last letter, which you have on your desk and was also emailed to you today. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead, if you've got any specific questions about some of the concerns that you've read about so far, we are here to answer. For instance, Cindy can speak to any CEQA-related issues. Gwen can speak to traffic. The applicant and I can speak to the actual location, the design. Otherwise, Karen from the superintendent of the elementary school district is here this afternoon and had requested a 15-minute presentation. So I will leave it up to your discretion as to if you have questions here or if you want to hear from Karen at this point.
Councils?
I'd like to listen to the superintendent.
Okay. Dr. Karen Schauer with the Galt Joint Elementary School District. Dr. Shower, these timers are set for 5 minutes. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and keep track of the time. When 5 minutes starts up, you'll be able to see where your time limit is, okay?
All right, and may I ask you a question before we
Yes,
start?
ma'am.
So, that, I have, Addison Stewart, who is our facilities attorney, along with, Blair Oz, who is SCI consultant. In that 15 minutes, they're going to join me in the presentation. We have some, staff who, and our board president, that will provide public comment, which could be at a different point, or they could follow it. So I was wondering if you would be willing to let them follow us?
Sure.
If they have speaker sheets up there, we're totally fine with that.
All right, thank you.
I don't want to see us limiting the school district being able to provide information to us. They have vital information that they should be able to present to us without this kind of time limit on them.
I understand that. And if council chooses to extend that, that's fine, but she asked for between 15 and 20 minutes. That's what I granted. Okay? If council wishes to extend that, or do they want, are they fine with 15 minutes?
They should be given the time that it takes necessary for them to make a presentation.
If we need to, we can take it to a vote.
Let's let them proceed.
Right.
Let's get
Thank you.
into it.
Dr. Shower.
I don't think we should limit them.
I can watch, so don't watch the timer, but we're working to stay within that 15 minutes.
Yeah,
All right.
appreciate it.
We may go a bit over, we're going to try to go under, how's that?
That works. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much, Mayor Cruz and council members, city staff. Really appreciate you allowing us to have some specific time to talk to you about a potential new elementary school resulting from the Eastview development. And would you please, oh, I'm sorry. Thank you so much. Okay. What we've been working very hard to do is address these 4 objectives that are on this slide. One is that we've been working to find solutions in terms of coming up with the necessary funding to support a new elementary school, and also looking at how we can address the funding in a timely way. As you noticed, as you're looking at the Eastview development, you'll see that the development occurs in phases, and that means it's not built overnight. And yet, we will need a new elementary school, and trying to work through how we come up with that funding, even if all the phases are not complete. That's one example of working on timely funding. The 4th bullet is planning to ensure that the location of this new elementary school would be a safe one and also with adequate size. And then the last area is that when we're looking at the placement of the new elementary school, that we are paying attention to the traffic impacts of that. So these are 4 areas that we've been working very hard to address in our planning. And again, some of this information, in fact, a lot of the information we have brought forward in our response letters through the environmental impact report, along with information to the Planning Commission. So next, I would like to have Blair Oz follow me next to provide some background about demographics related to this project, and also ideas that we brought forward concerning funding.
Thank you, Dr. Shower, and good afternoon, Mayor Cruz, Vice Mayor Payne, members of the council, and members of the staff. Again, my name is Blair Oz. I'm with SCI Consulting Group, and I'm pleased to be here this afternoon and appreciate the opportunity to share the district's concerns, serious concerns, and unresolved issues related to the school facilities to serve the Eastview specific plan. So this first slide simply is a projection of the students to be generated by not only the Eastview specific plan, but the Liberty Ranch development. So the top graph represents the Eastview specific plan and indicates that 637 elementary school students will be generated by the project and 209 middle school students. And then the Liberty Ranch development itself will generate approximately 80.5% of those students, 523 and 171 elementary school students. As Dr. Schauer had indicated, the school district, the general rule of thumb is that for new schools to serve this type of a project, the rule of thumb is that the school should be opened when there's 1/2 of the capacity of the school that's being proposed. And so the school district, approximately 650 students, the school district is proposing a school of 650 students. And so the school will need to be opened when enrollment hits about 325 students within the plan. So this next slide it discusses the funding of that needed elementary school to serve the students generated by the plan. In 1998, the Leroy F. Green School Facilities Act was passed, which established the funding model in California for new school construction, whereby school facilities would be funded 50% by the state and 50% locally through the levy of developer fees. However, this funding model is widely regarded as broken. And that's not my opinion solely, or solely the district's opinion. It's widely regarded at the state level, and all growing school districts have to wrestle with this broken funding model. It's broken in that it often does not provide sufficient funding and timely funding to construct the school facilities needed to serve the students generated by a development project such as this. Developer fees often provide only 1/3 rather than 50% of the cost of new school construction. And similarly, state grant program for new school construction only provides about 1/3 rather than the intended 50% of the cost of new school construction. So for many growing school districts, this leaves a funding gap of about 1/3 of the cost of new school construction. The chart that I have here indicates that. So the first column of figures is essentially the existing conditions for the school district to be able to fund this school that's needed for the ESU specific plan. It's estimated that the cost of the elementary school will be approximately $29 million. As I've indicated, there are primarily two sources of funding for construction of that school. One would be local funding through the levy of developer fees. The district is constrained with how that developer fee comes out. Unlike the city's developer fees or connection fees, where the city is able to charge full mitigation, the full cost, there's constraints, and that's why it's broken, that limit this to, rather than the intended 50%, it limits it to 1/3. You'll see here that the percentage that we've allocated, so we've looked at all of the homes that would generate 650 students, and it would come up with only approximately 44.6%. And that, the reason that that's not 1/3 is because we believe that this is the priority for the school district, so we're allocating all developer fees to this project. So we haven't even got to the point of talking about middle school facilities and interim housing costs associated with it. So throwing that all into the mix. The next is state funding. Again, intended to represent 50%, but only comes up with 1/3 of the costs. So that leaves a shortfall of $6.3 million, or over 22%. Normally it'd be a third, but we're working to get that gap down. In addition, this goes to show that this broken funding model provides inadequate funding. It does not provide full mitigation enjoyed by, the city when you're preparing your connection fees. The other challenge is the timely funding. As I'd indicated in my earlier remarks, the standard rule of thumb is that the school should be constructed and ready to be open when you have 325 kids, so halfway through the project. So arguably you're going to need that $29 million way up front 2 years earlier, but yet as it's granted out, that larger portion of developer fees is going to come in subsequent phases, and so there's a cash flow shortfall that is challenging as well. So we have been working very hard with the applicant and district's architects and other consultants, and to put together a plan that very simply, and again, the plan is very simply, you need an elementary school, just a simple 650 capacity elementary school to serve the students. The plan is such that first, because we're constrained with what the district would receive from state funding, they're only going to provide a third. There's no way to get around them providing any more than that. Then that other third has to come mostly locally. So you have to get that other third of that funding up. And so the proposed level of funding locally would go from $12.8 million to $16.2 million, so an additional $4 million to start to bridge that gap. The next part of this proposal is that, as you see here, the uses, and so these are the costs that are for the elementary school. So there's the school district has to acquire the site, develop the site, and construct the site. And interestingly, the state has allowed the city to adopt an ordinance that allows for the dedication of land for parks. You get land for parks for free, but the school district doesn't enjoy that same luxury. They actually have to acquire the site. So what the school district is proposing here, rather than pay $3.2 million for the entire site, which would represent a fair market value, we're suggesting that the district pay half that, and that funding would come solely from the state through the state funding. Similarly, the applicant is in a much better position financially to provide the site development costs. It's going to be much less expensive for them to provide those site development costs than the district. And so we're proposing that they would provide not only the site, but a developed site and they would accept 50% of whatever the site development costs are for that site. And I'm saying 50% because that's what the state grant would allow, but we still are trying to bridge that gap in that shortfall. And so that's another way is to just have the developing costs be funded by the state. So as you can see, that would get the shortfall down to a workable $100,000. But we still have the challenge of the cash flow challenge of being able to receive this funding in advance so that the school can be timely built when it's needed by the school district. So what the school district is looking to do is to participate in one option is to have the local funding come from either a portion of it or all of it participate in the city's infrastructure CFD that's been proposed for the project. And that would allow for, that CFD is allowed for all the infrastructure to serve the project. You have, the city and the applicant have the same cash flow shortfalls. We're just raising our hand and indicating the school district has got the same cash flow shortfalls. And so the school district would like to participate in that CFD as well so that there's adequate funding and timely funding to simply build the school to serve the students that clearly is going to be generated by the project. Next, I'll turn it over to Addison.
Blair Oz was sharing, when we're looking at, okay, well, what kind of school would this look like? Cost-wise, I think what our goal is envision Lake Canyon Elementary School is our newest elementary school, and the quality of the school that we would intend to end up with would be no less than quality than Lake Canyon Elementary School. That's what we're striving to do. So Blair has spoken to you about costs, and I think Galt certainly is a city, but it's more than that. It's a community, and that's what's so special about the community of Galt, because it's certainly through the years in my work and in living within the community as well, is that there's just been this spirit of working together to work through things. So I wanted to show you what our participation has been in this process, and then a number of meetings that have taken place to try to work forward, and still we haven't resolved things. These are the dates in which the district, myself included in this, the last two communications in August, well, starting in July 2014 and ending December 7th, 2015, written responses to the draft environmental impact report. And a number of things were brought up. I want to point out on the August 19th communication, there were areas that we brought up concerning financial, traffic, and site location and size. And the comment was in the response was that it had been noted and will be forwarded to the decision makers for their consideration. So, you know, again, that was where it stood with our written response to the EIR process. And then on the next page, talking about Galt as a community, well, again, trying to work through with different entities to move forward on this. And here you see meetings that have taken place with the developer, meetings with the city. We did have one meeting, and this was prior to Eugene Palazzo coming as city manager, and Steve Rudolph joined us at one of the meetings with the developer. On January 29th, 2016, we submitted a detailed proposal to the developer. We've not received written response concerning that detailed proposal, and we did attend the Planning Commission meeting. So again, we are trying to work through these matters that are very important to this community and our school system, but they are unresolved. And there are areas not only about the cost of the school, but also traffic, location, and size of school. I'm going to turn this next to our school facility.
Dr. Schauer, the time's up.
I'll make a motion to extend more time to Dr. Schauer.
Second.
So a motion and a second. What's your timeline?
15 minutes.
Call for the
Given
vote.
the applicant ample time, we need to give the school.
How much more time do you think you need, Karen?
How about 10 minutes?
Okay.
10 minutes? No longer than 10? That is without, we have some staff, and our board president is here too, and they are prepared for like 3-minute presentations.
Yeah. It's a public meeting. Let's have public comment.
Public comment, only 5 minutes.
That's because we self-impose that. I say let them speak.
Well, I have a motion on the floor in a second. Call for the vote, please.
Vice Mayor Payne?
No.
Councilmember Hewer?
Aye?
Councilmember Campion?
Aye.
Councilmember Powers?
No.
Mayor Cruz?
I say no as well.
Okay, I would like to propose that we do go ahead and give them another 10 minutes.
I have a motion for 10 minutes. Do you have a second? I'll second that. Call for the vote.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Payne?
Aye, I'm sorry.
Councilmember Hewer?
Aye.
Councilmember Campion?
Aye.
Councilmember Powers?
Aye.
Mayor Cruz?
Aye. Go for
Great
it, Ken.
example.
Thank you very much.
That's ridiculous.
Thank you, Dr. Schauer. Mayor Cruz, members of the City Council and staff, Addison Covert, my name, an attorney with the Parker & Covert Law Firm, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. I've been a school attorney for many, many years. I've had the pleasure of knowing Mr. Campion for a long time, and some of the members of your staff for a short period of time. They're doing an excellent job. But I would also like to commend Dr. Schauer. From all my years of experience as a school district lawyer, I don't think I've ever met a superintendent more dedicated to the local community and more dedicated to the schools that are under her charge than Dr. Schauer is. And that's a reason why she's here today, taking her time away from her busy schedule as superintendent to discuss with you the important issues of school funding in the community. And I'll just very briefly summarize Mr. Oh's comments one more time, just to stress the importance of the state of California's inability to properly deal with the cost of school construction. And I know your immediate reaction will be, well, then why does that burden then shift to us? Very good question. But at the end of the day, the Galt community, the city council, the planning commission, the high school district, the elementary school district, and the residents of the community need to take the initiative and take on the incentive to make sure that adequate school construction funding and adequate school facilities are built in the community. And let me get off my high horse, and I apologize for being a little bit overbearing on that, but I just think that there are a lot of issues at stake here that deserve a lot of careful and quick attention. I'm going to jump forward very quickly, if you don't mind, to the slide that you've seen many times previously and talk briefly about the issue of traffic and some of the other impacts that are associated with this proposed school site. One of the elements that you heard discussed earlier is that this is planned to be a combined school and park site, which is really a terrific and exciting use of joining public amenities and facilities together for the benefit of the overall community as a whole. The school site itself is a little bit undersized at 8.9 acres, but in tandem with the proposed city park site, there could really be an outstanding facility out there if the funding is put in place that will assure that the required facilities can be built in a timely manner. And I understand that school district staff has been working very cooperatively and in an excellent manner with personnel on behalf of your Parks and Rec department to come up with the kind of joint use agreement that can ultimately come to you and the school board to make that happen. Just briefly coming back to a couple of my other comments on earlier slides, that layout and location of the proposed school site presents severe traffic concerns to the school district at this time. These are elementary age students that will be attending the school. Many of them will be driven by their parents. Others will ride bikes. Some will be walking. There's a lot of concern that the school district's mind is still not yet resolved with respect to the collector roads that are running adjacent to the elementary school site. Now we realize that every developer has to be able to make a realistic level of profit on a project, otherwise there's no incentive to go through the headache and all the time and attention and problems associated with pushing a project along. But when you've created the kind of density that this plan calls for around the school site, when you've limited access to the school on collector streets rather than more of a thoroughfare, we have individuals here today that would like to speak very briefly to you about issues of bus transportation, issues of student safety, crossing and coming to the site, and issues of what it's going to take in order to properly serve that student body that's coming out of this project. The school district's here today because they want to see a high-quality school built there. They don't want to see scrapping, buying portables, jamming it up elsewhere in the community in order to accommodate students off-site. They want to make sure the students in that community have the kind of school facility that's necessary. They're here today to express to you their strong request that you work with them, that the developer work with them, that they can have, again, a proper and timely funding model approved and put in place that will benefit this school. They wouldn't be here today if they've been successful so far in that effort. They need your help, the help of city staff, the help of the developer to bring that all together and make that happen. And I've gone past my allocated time, so I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Schauer so she can conclude.
I'm skipping some slides to save some time. I'm going to go on to recommendations here. Council members, these are recommendations that we would appreciate your consideration in. One is that there is the timing of acquisition that we need to think about concerning the school site. It needs to be flexible because of how the funding can work as we work through this. The joint use of the park by the school is important work, and again, Armando Solis, I know you've been working very hard with our staff too to try to move forward on that, but the work is not done. The further traffic we need to really look at traffic more in this. We have some great concerns in that area. The analysis of funding is also an area, Blair Ogg talked about infrastructure CFD. We think that that could be part of the solution, and that we still need to look at potential additional funds to help address the state shortfall, this broken system in the state. And I would strongly recommend that you consider denying or delaying certification of the EIR because there are unresolved issues that really need to be worked through. And in closing, moving forward, I'm just going to underscore a few things on here. First of all, I really request that there's closer coordination between the City of Galt, our district office, and the developer to resolve the problems that we brought forward. Secondly, we want to see a neighborhood school sincerely in the Eastview development. Neighborhood schools are part of a community, and that's what we're striving to do. However, with the funding challenges that we have with getting this accomplished, that there could be the possibility that there would not be a new elementary school on that site. And that is not what we want to see, but that, again, is something in a worst-case scenario that we would have to all figure out how to resolve. And again, just in closing, the Eastview development certainly very promising for the community of Galt, and a new elementary school would be great for this community as well. We really want to work together to resolve these issues. And that is the end of our report, which was somewhat of a presentation. I apologize that we went about 22 minutes, I think. And we do have some public comments that would stay within, is it 2 minutes or 3 minutes?
5 minutes.
We can go to that next if you, whatever you would like.
When you're done, you can go ahead and head that way.
All right, all right.
Thank you, Dr. Schauer.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Before we moved on to the next speakers, with your permission, I would like to summarize, if I could, what I see the issue as it relates to the school financing, while Superintendent Schauer and Attorney Covert and the financial wrap are up for the school district, if that'd be appropriate.
You my guest.
So as I understand the issue, and please correct me at the end if this is not an accurate representation, but under state law, there is a limit on the amount of money that the developer is required to pay, and there's a limit on the amount of money in impact fees that you, as the governmental entity, as a school district, can impose on the developer. And that amount is roughly in the $10 million range. If you could go beyond that $10 million as far as your legal ability to raise those fees, we probably would not be here today. The school, or the state, also has a legislative role in how much money they're going to pay for school development. And so there's two problems both at the state level. First of all, they've limited the amount of money that you can require the developer to pay. And secondly, they've been a little bit abstract as it relates to the amount of money that they're going to fund for the school. So we're looking at roughly about a $24 million, $25 million school facility. The developer kicks in $10 million, and what the proposal is that you've put forward would essentially require the developer to come up with an additional $8 million. So basically, it would be an additional $3 million gap above the $10 million in impact fees. There would be an additional $5 million for site acquisition and development, and then to the extent that there was any state funding that did in fact flow through, there would be a possibility for the developer to be reimbursed on a portion or maybe even all of that $5 million. But at the end of the day, the developer would be at risk on this project $18 million. That's how I understand the proposal. The reason you're here today is because you, as a governmental entity, do not have legal ability to require the developer to pay this gap. And what you are doing is you're essentially asking this body to use its governmental authority to impose that funding obligation on the developer through the mechanism of the development agreement. So that's my summary of what I understand you're presenting today, and to the extent that I am wrong on any of those issues, please correct me.
I wanted to, I know, Addison, that there were some slides that you skipped through, and I'm looking for this one real quick here. I'm sorry, I turned that on. I apologize. Because there's a visual here with some of the other districts that you've worked with here. I'm looking. Oh. Right. I apologize. It's just right there, right there. Well, again, and I appreciate Mr. Rudolph, and again, I appreciate everything that you have done as transitions have taken place to, work with us to try to work through this. Certainly, there is a broken state model, and again, I appreciate that you're sharing kind of what we're up against, and again, it does take sitting down together on this, and I really wish that we could sit down together, City of Galt and developer and our school district, to work through this and not do it this way. But one of the things, and Mr. Covert, there may be a response that you would like to make for our response in terms of what Mr. Rudolph brought forward, but I think I wanted to go to this slide that you did not have an opportunity to share, because I'm standing beside one of the, I think, foremost school district facilities attorneys who's really helped our district so much and has worked with other districts and communities. I think it was important that they see this.
I agree. Thank you, Dr. Schauer. If I could just take a moment or two to respond to Mr. Rudolph's position. He's absolutely right. The state of California has put us in a bind, and we've talked about that at the Planning Commission, and now we're here today in front of the City Council talking about that same issue. But I think the critical component are twofold. First of all, we're not asking the developer to bridge that entire gap. We've come up with what we think is a reasonable plan for a limited additional amount of money from the developer that helps us bridge that gap, where the school district itself would still be at risk for having to address a significant portion of that additional cost that's not coming from the state and not coming from the base state-mandated developer fee amount. The developer will pay a state-mandated developer fee amount. Most developers in the state are required to do that by law and would do so here. We're looking for an additional amount that's really in the neighborhood, Mr. Oz, $3 million, as I understand it, which is the additional amount that would cause that extra amount of funding that would allow the school to be built. And secondly, and I don't want to run any more over my time than I already have, one of the important issues to take into consideration here is the traffic impacts that we've identified in the proposed specific plan and the layout of this site. And we've provided extensive written correspondence to the city on that issue, which I won't go into detail now. But that correspondence is based upon an important case that came out about 3 years ago that said that if there are traffic impacts that are harmful to school issues and harmful to school facilities, those impacts are not to be mitigated out of the state-mandated school construction program, because state-mandated school construction funds are intended to build schools, not deal with the idiosyncrasies of traffic problems in development projects that may be around the school. So there can be other funding mechanisms, other revenue mechanisms, other payments required of developers of projects as a part of the conditions for approval of a development project to deal with those traffic issues and to fund solutions to those traffic issues above and beyond the simple state school construction funding program that's intended only to build the school itself. So I would argue that the council does have the ability to mandate additional requirements from this developer with respect to his project and how it impacts that proposed school site and the ongoing operation of the school on that location, separate and apart from the state-mandated school construction program that Mr. Ross has been talking about earlier today.
So, Mr. Carter, just to clarify, you said that you were looking for a $3 million gap. My understanding at one point is that the developer offered an additional $1.5 million. I don't know if that offer's on the table still, but if it is, does that mean that what we're trying to close here today is a $1.5 million gap?
I'm just speaking as the lowly attorney on this team, and I'm not part of the decision makers. They've got the whole school board that makes those choices. But I think personally that that's probably about how far we are apart, is $1.5 million. And that's why your infrastructure CFD is so intriguing to the school district, because it sees that CFD as a mechanism that might help bridge this gap that would be palatable to the applicant and the other people involved as well.
All right, thank you. On this topic, I have Jennifer Porter.
Mr. Mayor, could I just insert a similar staff comment? We've heard a lot of statements and a lot of written correspondence claiming traffic concerns, traffic impacts, and this is an untenable site. But I've not yet to see any specific demonstrated problem. And unless the school is suggesting that they would have no on-site parking, no on-site circulation for drop-off, no on-site bus areas, that they would want to mitigate all of that out on the public street, which would seem to be very poor planning around the school district from a safety standpoint. I don't believe that there's been a demonstrated, we can say traffic, we can say safety, but the school hasn't designed the site yet. And I would think you would design the site to attempt to mitigate those safety concerns that I keep hearing, but have yet to see any demonstration of. And as your public works director, I would just like, what is that specific concern? Well, our buses won't be able to get into the site.
Well, you don't put, number one, schools at major intersections, and that is the major intersection in this development.
And
you look at you look at elementary districts, they are on residential streets, with the exception of, there might be one or two exceptions that were built long ago.
We also reduced the size of the...
And reduced the size. That site was located on the general plan in specific response to the elementary district because they did not want to be on a major street. So,
Councilman Campion, just to finish the thought, is all I'm saying is I think we need to be specific. They're saying that it's not addressed adequately, but we have looked at the traffic impacts, which typically, without a site design, it's very difficult to do any more analysis than has been done at a general level. Now, whether you want, choose to be at a major intersection, that to me is a different discussion than saying there's a traffic impact. There are many schools that are at major collectors in many communities that work just fine. So I don't think it's what size street you're next to. I think it's how you design your ingress, your egress, your parking, your bus access, your parent drop-off, that becomes much more critical to traffic safety and traffic mitigation is the point I'm making. Not whether the site's big enough or it's located in the right spot, but just to say that there are traffic concerns, we would need to be more specific.
Real quick, Dr. Sharp, go ahead.
Very, very quickly, first of all, we would love to sit down and talk to you more about this, and we have spent some again, district resources working with an expert traffic consultant in this area. We also have some of our transportation staff that are here. We do have more specifics. We've also looked at, we have used district resources and time and worked with outside experts to try to work on how the school could fit on that property and the park and look at the street. So yes, we are doing our due diligence on this, and we have concerns.
All right, thank you. Jennifer?
Good afternoon. Thank you, City Council members and Mayor Cruz. I will stay within my 5 minutes. My name is Jennifer Porter. I'm the principal at Marengo Ranch Elementary School. This is my 28th year in the Galt community as an educator. I spent 16 years in the high school district. When I left, there were over 2,200 kids at Galt High. It was a huge school. And I've been in the elementary district for 12 years now, 4 years as Marengo's principal. Marengo is located in a community, in a neighborhood. I have 560 students, and we have embraced a very personal approach to learning in our school community. The students are always asking me, Mrs. Porter, how do you know all of our names? I do that because I know the kids at my school. I'm looking at this new development, and I'm concerned about the timeliness of the development, and I'm really worried if it isn't built at all with a new school. We at Marengo are the closest school, so I would be absorbing most of the new student population that would be moving into the area. I don't know how I could absorb that many kids at my little school site, but I would have to do some repurposing of my existing school. I have a severely handicapped county program that would probably need to be moved. I have a city-taught classroom, which is a wonderful program that we have on our Marengo campus. I don't see how I would be able to keep them there. My after-school program through the city, I have a wonderful space for them on my stage. I don't know how I would continue with that program. And I would have to add new portable classrooms that would be built on my field, my athletic field, which would impact my PE, my recess, and our Parks and Rec program. When I consider some of the parking concerns, I don't currently have enough parking places for my existing staff members. We would spill out into the community onto the adjacent streets just to park, and I'm not even sure where our parents would park when they came in to volunteer in the classrooms or pick up their children. Traffic issues. On a normal day, we back up all the way to different stop signs within our little community. With a larger increase in enrollment, I imagine we would be backed up all the way to Walnut and possibly over to Carilion. And I imagine it would be very frustrating for the people who live in our school community to have this many cars in our neighborhood. Grade level programs, we group our instruction in buildings. Our reading programs have students moving from room to room. If we were a community of portables on the campus, that would impact the instruction in the classroom. When I think about the cafeteria, trying to feed that many students during the day, I'm not sure how that could happen. We wouldn't even have the ability to hold an assembly with all of our students in one building together. We do Friday morning things that are a lot of fun at Marengo, and I don't think we would be able to do what we normally do. We are a neighborhood school. Our students and our families walk to school together. We're a community of learners, and we really have embraced this philosophy of a personalized approach to what we do at Marengo. With overcrowded conditions, we would lose that feel. Our students would potentially be moved to other school campuses if we had to restructure the boundaries. We might have to look at year-round programs, which Marengo has done in the past. I worry that we would lose teachers to other school districts if the quality of the programs that we offered was not what they wanted. And we have a teacher shortage in the state of California. They could be lured elsewhere. Class size consideration would also be adjusted, and that would impact the quality of instruction. If I was a parent of an Eastview student, I would want my child to go to school in a neighborhood school. I wouldn't want to get my kids on a bus and have them travel to another school outside of my community. And in an overcrowded school, I would not know the names of all of the children at my school. I would struggle to cultivate a sense of a strong school community that is essential for everyone to learn, grow, and become positive and successful citizens in a community of Galt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Porter, do you know the size of your site?
No, not offhand. I have about 35 classrooms.
No, I mean the actual acreage of that school site.
I'm not sure.
Would you like to hear? Yeah.
Marengo is 11.05 acres, of which about 5.79 acres makes up the buildings, and 5.16 acres makes up the blacktop and fields.
Okay, this is kind of interesting spelling here. Kevin Selstrom, is that correct?
Actually, two of us today. Thank you for allowing us to share with you. I'm Kevin Selstrom, Director of Transportation for Galt Schools Transportation Department. We serve both Galt Elementary and Galt High School districts. I myself have been here a little over 3.5 years, but came from Elk Grove School District, where I participated in some of these same discussions for over a dozen school constructions in the last 7 years I was there. I brought with us as well our instructor, our state certified school bus driver instructor, Dawn Panasco. She has been with us for 16 years in that capacity and 22 years in our districts. She assisted in the construction and planning process of Marengo Ranch Elementary, Lake Canyon Elementary, McCaffrey Middle School, and the Liberty Ranch and Escalada campus. Part of what she does teaching our drivers allows her to be very keenly aware of the mechanics of navigating our school buses through tight spaces.
Good afternoon.
After seeing some of the plans, I did have some concerns, and so I brought forth some of the things that I saw. The appearance of narrow roads and small single-lane turning circles, along with a center median, will make it very difficult to navigate a 40-foot bus. On an average, we looked at the field trips this year, and we go into school sites approximately 45 times throughout the school year for field trips. So we will be taking our larger capacity buses into these community schools. So narrow roads, especially when combined with on-street parking, can present obstacles to a 10-foot wide school bus traveling what is expected to be very busy roadways and school zones. As Ms. Jennifer Porter presented in front of Marengo, we have heavy traffic, and that's not uncommon in front of school loading zones. So I'm really concerned with the on-street parking, trying to maneuver our buses with the overhang of mirrors, that it's going to get a little tight going through there. And then also with the roundabout, I looked at the guidelines set forth by AASHTO, which is the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, and they have guidelines that say small roundabouts are primarily used for passenger vehicles. Many roundabouts will only accommodate up to a 30-foot vehicle. So this would be okay for our fire personnel to take fire trucks through, but trying to maneuver a 40-foot bus through a small roundabout. So I'd like you to take consideration in that when you're planning these roundabouts. I did notice that we have 5 mentioned on the main road, which is Walnut, that we'll be having to travel through to get to our school sites. We currently have turning circles in the town of Woodbridge, Lodi area, and Elk Grove that our 40-foot vehicles cannot maneuver through currently. So I don't want to find ourselves in a position that we're not able to get to our own school sites. And again, looking at some of the plans, I have some concerns of being able to enter and exit our school loading zones with a center median in place. We will have to swing out over that center median to get safely out into the roadway. I would also like to ask that you take into consideration that crosswalks not be placed in the curb or the roundabouts themselves. As we have here on Twin Cities Road, it makes it very difficult for vehicles and school buses. They create blind spots when those crosswalks are placed in the middle of the roundabout. We would suggest that when you're looking at putting in crosswalks, that you put them in the approaching lanes prior to the roundabout so that the traffic has a clear view on them. But that is all that I have for you, and I thank you for your time and consideration. I know that Kevin has more.
Thank you. Again, as Dr. Schauer mentioned earlier, we are a part of the community. We live in this community. We serve the students in our community. We really want and indeed ask to be part of that discussion with you, with our developers, with the community, to be able to make this a success, to make it really a positive impact on our community. We do provide home-to-school and field trip transportation to all of our students. So as we have these discussions, it's not just about how do we get to our schools. There is a possibility on any given day that any school bus in our district could go down any street to pick up a child with special needs, to service activities at our schools and our communities, and possibly in the event of an emergency to be able to evacuate that school or a community event. We need to make sure as we plan these facilities that we have adequate space to do that in combination with the parents, with community members, with cars that are going to be stacking up on these same roads. There again, I guess in closing, I'd like to ask again, feel free to give us a call, ask us if there's anything we can do to help in this process. We want to be part of that solution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Schauer, was there anyone else? I don't have anybody else from the school district noted.
Yes, board president, Kevin Pavanaugh.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Papano. I'm currently serving as the president of the elementary school board. I'm going to forego the redundancy of the things I prepared to talk about because I think the issues have been pretty clearly brought up and demonstrated. And back up to the bigger picture. When I ran for school board in 2010, at the beginning of, or the depth of the recession, things were tough. I certainly know what it's like to scrimp by. We've been doing that for years. What I'm looking at right here is in funding, just flat out, there's no way that we can build a school the way it exists today. Our option is to scrimp by again and put portables on other facilities and bus kids out. I moved down here from our neighbor to the north to get away from kindergarten waiting lines, narrow streets, tiny lots, lots of rooftops, and not being able to get into your school. When I moved here, I was right at that middle phase, and it was perfect. There was a school ready and waiting. We were in the middle, it opened up, there was no issues. That's what I'd like to provide here. So on the funding, it's just flat out, it's not there. And I don't know what the answer is. You've heard a lot of numbers, and maybe there's a lot of negotiation and working together that has to happen still. My other concern is the traffic. You can call Walnut whatever it is, a collector, a main thoroughfare. I live near it, it's a busy street. That's the bottom line. Eventually there's going to be development further east. Cherokee Lane is not the end of the world, it's, end of the line right now, but there's going to be more traffic going through there. Looking at the very minimal space that we have, we can do the best we can with working with Parks and Recs for a joint use agreement. I look at it just in simple terms. I see no matter if we put the entrance to the north or the south or east or west, it's kind of at an angle. Either one of those side streets, we're going to have traffic backing up out into Walnut. It's a mess every morning already at Walnut and Marengo. I just see that carrying on. Look at the other end, there's 13 lots, 13 rooftops out of 1,700 plus. If those weren't there, and we had 3 sites to work with, maybe there's something that can mitigate putting the school and the traffic near, a main thoroughfare, the only real thoroughfare that people use, on the northeast side right now. So, again, I say I don't want to get into the specifics and be redundant, as other staff has already brought it up. But our community, and I've said since I ran for school board, and I say it all the time, people get tired of hearing of it, but I think the biggest impact on our community is the schools, because we are making the citizens that will define our community for the next few generations. And I know when I bought a house, I came here because it was a good place for my kids to go to school, and the school district's a great employer for my wife. And that's, why people, I think, still, it's been a few years, but when they shop for a home and they decide how much they're going to pay and where they're going to look, schools is the first thing they look at. And right now, frankly, if they ask me, I tell them you're looking at a development that may not have a school, and your kids may be having to get bused off to affordable at another site. So I certainly appreciate your time and serious consideration.
I do have a question for either you or Dr. Schauer. Do you plan to continue busing children to the middle school, to the single middle school that we have?
Yes. As of now, there's no change on the horizon for that. We salvaged that through the cuts where we lost other.
What about Greer Elementary School? What's the enrollment in that school in Valley Oaks? Well, specifically Greer.
I don't have the numbers. Yeah. 520 at Greer.
And so is that high as well as Valley Oaks? Both of those are full to capacity? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wondered about the middle school, if you had any plans to, I know you're busing kids from all over to the middle school, and I wonder if you had any plans to maybe look at Greer, taking it back to the middle school.
That's peripherally been discussed. The amount of money it costs to convert that into an elementary school to make it accessible for the older kids. it would be even more to try and turn that back into a middle school and give it what's required for middle schoolers. So we will be continuing that busing across.
At Greer.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we're moving on to the parks.
So that's fine. So, very quickly, because we're running short on time here, with regard to parks, the project is required by the general plan. There are basically three documents that govern parks in the city. The general plan and the Parks Master Plan, which are fairly consistent with each other, and then the zoning ordinance, or the zoning code. The general plan and the Parks Master Plan both require 10 acres of parks for the Eastview area. There would be one 5-acre park, which we discussed just south of the school, and then the other would be 5 acres that's basically designated currently on the general plan map in the non-participating property area.
Tony, sorry to interrupt. Maybe I'd recommend a break, for a few minutes. Not to interrupt the parks, but we got 2 council members that have left the dais.
Council?
Yeah, let's take a break.
Okay. I have a funny feeling.
I'm sorry, Tony.
We're going to put it on hold for about 10 minutes, Tony, so we'll break for 10 minutes. Now it's official. Let's rock.
Here comes Mary Lou.
Okay, if we can start filtering into seats, please. Steve. Mr. Winkler. Thank you. We'll continue this with parks.
Due to the interest of time, I'm just going to simply say that after we vetted everything out and did the research, the project is consistent with the Parks Master Plan, and with the contribution of the parks that are being proposed, as well as the required payment of impact fees for the amount of parks that they have not constructed that are required for the development code, project will meet all of our code requirements. With that, we can go ahead and move on to the financials if everybody's ready.
We're ready.
Okay.
So with regard to the financials, you have in front of you, you've got two sets of financial impact
We're going
analyses.
to have no discussion on the parks, because I did have some questions on that. We have two of the parks, I don't know if you put the map up there. There's two private parks shown. Sorry about that. There were two private parks shown in the project?
In the open space, or the, I would say the Gulch area, correct?
The Gulch area. And when I look through the Park Master Plan, it identifies open space areas as passive use. So are these active, or are these passive parks that are going to be located in the open space area?
Well, and the applicant can actually probably talk to that a little bit about what the design is. They will have a community pool within there, as well as a community clubhouse, and meeting area within those two 1.5 acre portions. The remainder of the Gulch area, though, would be passive open space, again, with the trails, and also serving, again, as detention and whatnot. So the only areas that would have the constructed structures, such as the pool and the clubhouse, would be the two, as well as the parking lots we discussed earlier, would be the two 1.5 acre areas within the Gulch area.
And those are private facilities, correct?
It would be HOA maintained facilities, correct.
So residents just within this subdivision would have access to that, as well as other parks in the community, but no other residents in the community would have access to those.
I will let Sam speak to how he would allow those to be used.
Thanks. First of all, the two lots within the Dead Man Gulch corridor are separate lots. As separate lots, we're proposing park space on them. And the first one is a top lot, if you will, playground space. The second one is the clubhouse, mainly a meeting room for the HOA. It has some few other amenities that won't bore you with all the details. However, the way they're arranged is that the tot lot or play area that's open to the community, to the city. The clubhouse area is a little bit different. We're building the clubhouse on the backs of the Liberty Ranch residents. They'll pay for it, and they'll maintain it. We will allow citywide residents to use it if they agree to defray the expenses of their period of operation, electricity use, janitorial service, that sort of thing. The playground, however, is on a pedestrian corridor in which we're constructing a bridge that leads to the high school for pedestrians, so there's no way we would want to gate that off. Within the clubhouse area, we have what is referred to as a demonstration kitchen. It's actually something that's probably going to be in the exterior of the building, around a patio trellised area, adjacent to what is anticipated to be a community garden. The community garden will be used by the Liberty Ranch residents. However, we've offered to the high school, because of their agricultural curriculum, that they will have some use of the community garden and the community kitchen if they so desire. So that's generally the explanation of both of them. If I can answer some further questions, I'd be happy.
And what about the pool?
The pool's for the Liberty Ranch residents, to the extent that we have one. We're not sure of that at this point, because you as a city have in your Parks Master Plan the need for a large pool to serve the city, and you have that programmed in about a mile south of us into a future community park. Keeping in mind that for every privatization feature that I have in my community, that's that much less demand we put on citywide facilities. So the question is, I can't build a pool that will serve the city, or half the city, however you want to look at it. You can take fees that you're generating from me and devote it towards it.
And then I guess that's part of my point. Generally, active park and recreation activities are disallowed within the open space area, and I've read somewhere where it's been staff's position that you would get partial credit on your parkland dedication fee for those private facilities. I would take issue with that because, number one, under the regular zoning ordinance, not the specific plan, that type of activity isn't allowed, and I don't understand why we are changing those types of regulations.
Well, we're not. We created certain lots, and we don't count them in the open space, we count them as parks.
No, but my point is, if you look at the existing land use map, that is open space. You're converting it to an active parkland.
But if you looked at your existing land use plan, you wouldn't even have the 2 extra parks I put in there, and those are those bad things?
No, I'm not
Well,
saying
that's why we do specific plans.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. When you do a general plan, you don't plan to the level that we're at today, nor do you plan to the level of a tentative map. So, you know, that's you don't plan every park on a general plan map, particularly neighborhood maps.
What is the point?
The point is, you said you didn't plan the other 2 parks. You wouldn't do that under normal circumstances.
Yes, you would.
Well, that's a difference of professional opinion, Mr. Veltri.
Mr. Stewart? Mr. Campion just said, were they going to get half credit for these parks that are?
Our development code does allow for private recreation areas to receive half credit. Again, that's subject to council approval, but that is a provision in our existing development code. It has been for quite some time. And again, the reason for the provision is because there would be the offset, as Sam just mentioned, that if there's a community pool in this location, then presumably there'd be less impacts from the residents in this community on the existing community pool, and same with the rest of the park facilities. So there is that assumption that was made when that provision was created in the development code.
But we still don't know if we're having a pool.
Well, I'm just throwing out pool, for instance, but just for these 2.
Private parks.
Correct, in general.
Get half credit for their park fees?
They potentially could, yes.
It should be pointed out that the 2 additional parks in the neighborhood, within the neighborhood that were not shown in the general plan, we'll construct them at our cost, and we'll maintain them at our cost for 10 years, essentially 10 years. We want that so that we can maintain them in a state that we can have model home space. And then they can become whatever the city so desires as far as recreation. You have control after that.
I understand, they're marketing tool.
But those would be more passive in nature,
sorry,
correct?
At the early stages, yes.
Parks are marketing tool.
I mean, they could be informal lawn sports and so forth, but the question is really,
well, and I understand your desire to do that. At the same time, I know that there are proposals, I've read somewhere, where you would want to limit the use of those parks. And that, I think, because if they are public parks, they've been offered for dedication, although that you've asked us not to accept them for dedication in some of the agreements, that either they're really a public park or they're not.
Well, I haven't, we've withdrawn any requests for limitations on them, other than the fact that they not have backstops and sport athletic fields constructed on them, which would not make a very good marketing amenities for us. And when you consider some of the other facilities that are nearby, you'll have those sports fields in those locations.
What other facilities are you talking about?
Well, you've got a 5-acre park near an elementary school proposed by us. It's solely for athletics.
Right.
You have a 5-acre park just north of us in the non-participating owners that sometime they may do it. You have the McCaffrey Sports Field.
And
right
I think what you need to look at is the level of usage on those facilities, and you'll find that they are pretty well maxed out.
You have undeveloped park space of about 17 acres on McCaffrey right across the street from Marengo. The other high schools like Canyon Lake and Marengo, I think they have a lot of undeveloped space there.
Those are that's school property, that's not city property, it's not parkland.
I understand that.
Well, you intimated it was parkland.
If I may, the Planning Commission, when they made the recommendation to you, further limited the time on how long these parks could be maintained, say, marketing tools, for instance. So the first park there on the southwest area would be constructed within Phase 1. So once Phase 1 was constructed, then the park would actually be turned over fully to the city for any type of use. The park up there on the northeast area is within Phase 5. So once Phase 5 gets under construction, they use it throughout the construction. Then again, once it's completed, it's turned over.
I just want to say one thing about small neighborhood parks, which these are, and they're, we know we're a very unique city that we're kind of like in two different sections. I really don't see somebody from the east side run into the west side to go to a small park, or vice versa. I mean, most people want to go to the park that's close to their neighborhood, and just adding a couple more parks to a neighborhood alleviates some of the problem for the other parks. That's my alarm, I'm sorry.
I guess my last comment would be with regard to the park adjacent to the undersized school site that was reduced from 10 acres to 8, whatever it is.
No.
All of the school sites out there are fully fronted by streets. Is that correct?
All of the other parks of
The two other public parks.
Yes, they are.
Is there a reason that you would not do the same with the park which is adjacent to the school? Because that you have backup lots.
No, we never do that.
The subdivision map, one of your maps, I believe, showed backup lots too.
Oh, no, we have backup lots. We would never put a street there. We would not want to surround that park by a street, because this is being developed in conjunction with the school, and we would like to have a non-conflict pedestrian movement there. And also, if you look at the two small parks we've been talking about, we've, at our cost, put in parkways to separate the pedestrians from the street, to walk from one side of the community to the other through the middle of that park area, so that there are no conflicts with traffic, or at least they're minimized.
I don't understand that. I don't understand that. How are you going to have more conflicts?
With the street?
What you're doing is providing accessibility to the site.
Well, you can have accessibility to a site and cross the street too, and that would be a conflict.
Armando, when parks are built, we have guidelines about what we would want to see on a 5-acre park. I mean, some of the small community parks have play equipment, they have walkways, they have trees. When I read this, it sounds to me like it's more just a green grass area.
No, I thank you for asking that question, Councilwoman. The talk lots, children things, those kind of things, picnic tables, I don't have a problem with that. I don't want major jungle gyms and backstops to softball fields and things of that nature.
No, I understand.
So no, as far as those types of more passive facilities, I mean, I have said this before, and I'll say it again. I think more people live here than children that want to play sports on an organized field, particularly if you have young children, particularly if you have senior citizens, particularly if you have unmarried couples or retired couples. They don't want to go to a baseball field, and so you're asking me to design an entire community so that you can have athletic fields, and we didn't want to do that. But I'm not trying to prevent the young children, the young tots, and the senior citizens from sitting, reading, throwing a frisbee, informal lawn sports, that kind of thing.
Armando, are there guidelines in the parks plan? I'm sorry, I just not.
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of any
Okay.
going through here.
So when the developer builds a park, he basically.
I did a little bit of research on that master plan. I can answer the question. Your neighborhood parks, which is your 5 to 8 acre parks, should have something like an organized ball field and whatnot, which is being proposed for the neighborhood park, which is just south of the school. The smaller parks, though, again, are called out for basically tot lots, passive play areas, and picnic areas and whatnot. The Parks Master Plan does not call for organized sports facilities in those smaller park areas. So, again, like I mentioned earlier, the project is consistent with the Parks Master Plan with regard to those development standards. And some of the standards that they are proposing for build-out of these smaller parks, again, are picnic areas, lawn areas, the trail system, tot lots, and whatnot. So
the city really has no say in what those small parks, how they're constructed or what. I mean, I'm just concerned that they get dedicated to us now. We've got to maintain the grass, or we've got to do something about. I mean, all of these things that were or were not done.
right, and that is a discussion that we've been having for quite some time in this discussion with regard to this project. Is we also want to make sure that it's not overbuilt, where 10 years from now, when it's dedicated to us, that we can't afford to maintain it. So. When the actual project does come through, it's going to be vetted through again the Parks Department, Parks Commission, and whatnot, to make sure that the facilities do actually meet the needs of the community for the long term.
I'm a little concerned about private facilities. This community, one of the things about this community, and it's been unique about this community, is that we have some wonderful facilities that the community is very proud of and that we need to maintain, and it's part of what makes us, better word, that we've assimilated as people have moved into this community. I mean, many of us have been here since, the days when it was less than 5,000 people, and we all have just built in together. And when we start having private facilities that part of the community is excluded from, and the community paid for these other facilities that everybody can use, I have some concerns about that and what that does in fracturing our community, in that this development becomes very separate because it has its private facilities as compared to the other facilities that have been funded by the community.
All right, moving on.
I just want to say one
Go
thing.
ahead.
I was concerned that Parks and Recs had an opportunity to weigh in on this before we went too far, and Armando said that he had attended meetings and was able to give his input. So I just wanted to let you know that.
I have been included from the beginning. Tony has included Parks and Recreation, and he has gotten feedback from Parks and Rec Department.
Yeah, I thought that was important, that you have an opportunity to give your expertise in on it. I'm glad you did.
Has the Parks Commission?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to financials then. We have basically two sets of documents. We've got the financial impact analyses. One was done for Eastview overall, the other for Liberty Ranch. That also included the marketing analysis that we talked about earlier at the back of those two documents. And then we have the public facilities financing plans again for Eastview and Liberty Ranch. At this point, I know we're getting close to 5, or we got past 5 o'clock.
That's fine.
If you would like me to continue, we'll go ahead and turn it over to the preparers of these documents. Okay.
I'm concerned that we scheduled this meeting as 2 to 5.
I
That was
made
the
arrangements
agreement.
based on 2 to 5.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that we didn't get as far and that we need to continue it and need to, but my schedule is 2 to 5.
I would like to, I didn't get a chance to completely review the public facilities finance plan either, so to be honest with you, the other one I did take a look at, but I would entertain a motion to continue this meeting, and hopefully at a time when, if more people wanted to show up, they could, say a 6 o'clock meeting.
I second that.
A motion by Councilmember Campion and a second by Councilmember Hewer. Any further discussion? Call for the vote.
Vice Mayor Payne?
No.
Councilmember Hewer? Yes. Councilmember Campion?
Yes?
Councilmember Shower? No. Mayor Cruz?
No, I want to continue.
At this point, I'll go ahead and invite up Eric from DPFG. They prepared these documents. The city has actually hired Goodwin Consulting to do a peer review on the city's behalf because we know that these are significant documents. And so once Eric is done with his presentation about how these documents were formulated, we'll turn it over to Dave and Cindy from Goodwin, and they'll go ahead and discuss from the city's point of view how the documents work for us.
Could I ask a question just for a second, Tony? How long do we think this?
Yeah, I apologize, I have to leave. I've got it.
Mayor, maybe make some recommendations on, some alternatives so we can have the full council, at.
Well, the other thing is, that's what we scheduled, that's what we agreed on.
And,
It's a hope that it would be over with.
so I guess the option to, continue as we are, or reschedule it at another time. We do have this project noticed for the public hearing on April 5th for our regular scheduled council meeting. Could be a recommendation to maybe hold another continue this workshop to the afternoon of April 5th. Possibly you can start at 1 to 3 or 4, and so you have a break to go
I don't really.
to the meeting at 5.
I would be okay with another meeting, but not the day going down. And I would, we've all met with city staff. We've all, had questions, had concerns. What I would like is there is another meeting. If council has concerns, that it's incorporated into the presentation, so everybody's not continually interrupted every time. I mean, I try to listen to some of the stuff, but it goes back and forth. So I would suggest that, we do as we should do and talk to staff, and if there's really pertinent stuff that we need to know, it should be included in the presentation, and then we can have it done, and we don't have to interruption. I apologize, Mary Lou. This would be a study session. It's time for us to understand this project and to understand our concerns and to get those concerns addressed. And we've all met with staff and we've all met with staff to address some of those concerns. So I'm just saying, why can't they be up at the front, the concerns, instead of...
Well, I think it's really important to have a public discussion regarding these things and not private discussion.
Are you suggesting that we sort of continue this to the regular council meeting, whatever we haven't covered?
I personally don't want it. I don't want a study session before the council meeting.
Make it part of the council meeting.
Maybe we can continue to another date next week, Tuesday the 29th. We can have that any time during the day, in the afternoon or the evening. A Tuesday work for the developer?
Not ignoring you.
And Councilmember Hewer, I wasn't saying to make it private. I was just saying, can our concerns come up at the front of the discussion instead of all in the middle of the discussion? I mean, if we're going to talk about finances. I think this is an opportunity for the community to understand the impact of this project on our community. I do too. Yeah. I'm not dissing that. I'm dissing the way it's presented. Well, I cancel my appointment. I can stay until 7. So.
stay until 6, but if we need to go further than 6, then,
Well,
you know.
can we make it happen that long? So can you do it in 40 minutes?
Well, now, is there, what else is on there besides the financial?
And there's public comment, there's citizens that have been waiting all evening to talk.
We only have 3 public comments, so we're good on that.
Okay, I'm not.
Well, the other thing is, we have not discussed everything that's going to be coming in front of us, which is, and that's, we're not gonna be able to even touch that tonight.
We have a consultant here. Could we continue with him? Since Ms. Shearer's able to stay till 6?
Well, if we can go till 6, why don't we press on till 6, and then at that time, schedule another, time next week,
Project development agreement.
and see where we're at.
CBS.
Let's go as far as we can till 6 o'clock, and then if we need to reschedule, we can.
Okay, good. I'll go quickly. Good afternoon, my name is Eric Quinlan. I work with Development Planning and Financing Group. We prepared the fiscal impact analysis and the public facilities financing plan. The fiscal impact analysis objective is to estimate projects' annual fiscal impacts to the city. We prepared it, DPFG prepared it in conjunction with Goodwin Consulting Group and the city staff. We used the city's fiscal year 2015 and 16 budget as a baseline for revenues and costs. We assumed that property tax split would be 50-50 with the county and the city. And we assumed that we would annex into the city's CFD 2005-1.
Is that assumption based on the 50-50 split, is that based on, history, or what did you base that on?
It's based on history, and it's a wag at what we might end up at with negotiations that are to be coming with the county.
So that could be, those numbers could be high or they could be low.
It's still a negotiation that will have to take place with the county. Absolutely. The fiscal impact analysis evaluates revenues and costs associated with the public services required to serve the project. The FIA used market study data to estimate property values, estimated project-driven property tax revenues, spending behaviors that generate sales tax revenues, revenue analysis, and used city budget to evaluate cost per person served, and analyze costs to serve the project to general fund and culture and recreation fund expenditures. It also evaluated road maintenance costs and project-specific costs as well. This is a little detailed and kind of hard to read, but this is a roll-up of the overall fund revenues and expenditures. And overall, it shows a net surplus for the entire ECU specific plan of $140,000 or $83 per unit. Additionally, I'd like to illustrate that there was $3.7 million in revenues for ECU specific plan and a baseline budgetary expenditure of $3.2 million for the entire ECU specific plan area, which is approximately $555,000 surplus. That baseline budgetary expenditure is based upon current city fiscal year 15 and 16 budget. Also assumes project-specific maintenance costs. There was an additional $414,000 worth of road maintenance costs and deferred maintenance costs that were added to the budget or to the fiscal impact analysis that ultimately reduced the surplus on a per unit basis from $327 to $83 by including that enhanced service level expenditure of $245 per unit, which I'll describe on the next slide.
I think, do we have that handout? Because the staff report that we have doesn't follow what you're doing. So
You should have this presentation, yes.
That'll be within your PowerPoint presentation. Slide 58.
What's the cover look like?
This one, cover.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay, got you. Thank you.
Yeah, you can't read it.
The fiscal impact highlights or the project, the fiscal impact included road maintenance costs that were 4 times existing funding for road maintenance at $28,600 per lane mile. That was based upon estimates from a citywide road maintenance efficiencies. It didn't evaluate the new street that would be built at Liberty Ranch and Eastview specifically. The FII funds project-specific maintenance costs and has a net positive fiscal impact to the city, both the plan area and Liberty Ranch, of $140,000 across Eastview specific plan and $60,000 across the Liberty Ranch project specifically.
When you say net positive per unit, is this annually?
Annually,
Starting in year one?
at build out.
Okay, so what is between day one, first house built, and build out?
That would require a cash flow analysis and.
Well, that's a fiscal analysis for the first 20 years of the development. And either you're positive or you're negative. I mean, you've skipped 20 years. That's ridiculous. You skipped the first 20 years to show whether it's positive or negative.
Would suggest that the services that are required on the first 50 residents would be proportional to the cost that would be to serve the 1,700th resident.
I would disagree with you.
What do you have to support that disagreement?
Once they start construction out there, the police department has responsibility and oversight to respond to issues out there. That's just one example. So I think
Agreed upon by DPFG and city staff and the consultant that the evaluation would be on a build-out scenario, not a cash flow scenario on a year-by-year evaluation, so that was not done as part of this analysis.
Well, I think, in my opinion, unless you get the cumulative analysis from day one up to build-out, it's pretty meaningless, because you can have wide fluctuations in costs.
Mayor.
Do you mind if I jump in?
Mayor, it's, David, our city consultant.
Dave Frudenberger, Goodwin Consulting Group. We're the city's peer review consultant on this. We did have this conversation whether we should do sort of a year-by-year analysis versus a build-out analysis. And it's true, and I know you know this, that in many cases an annual or even phased fiscal analysis is conducted, but it's also true that in many cases a build-out analysis is conducted. And we decided for a variety of reasons that a build-out analysis would work here, and some of those reasons include this project, for example, doesn't generate or trigger the need for example, a new fire station, or there aren't anticipated to be major cost steps or thresholds along the way. And in fact, the way that the calculation is being done, and Kurt, I think you're familiar with this too, is to use a multiplier. So you take the city's average costs and apply that to the project and calculate that going forward. The assumption being that over the course of time, at any given point in time, your costs are going to be reflective of the amount of development that has occurred up until that point. Similarly, the amount of revenues that would be generated by the project would also reflect the amount of development that has occurred up until that point. And a classic example there that we all are usually concerned about is if the development is expected to include a significant amount of sales tax producing retail development, you'd want to take an annual look at that and make sure that you're not making the assumption that a lot of those sales tax revenues are occurring early in the project when in fact oftentimes they occur at the back end. Well, that's not the case with Liberty Ranch. There isn't any retail developments being proposed. There is a little bit for the entire Eastview project, but that wouldn't occur until the back end anyway. And not only that, but the analysis is being conducted based on a demand side approach. In other words, when houses are developed, there's going to be people out there, and they're going to go shopping. And we made some assumptions together as a team as to how much of those retail sales would occur inside the city versus outside the city. And so that's why we didn't do the annual analysis.
I think that the problem with that is you make those assumptions, and those assumptions are something that are projected over a 20-year period of time. And I think the probability of error increases when you've spanned that far. Depending upon what the incremental assumptions were in the intervening years. So I don't know that I necessarily agree with it. I think that, you know, once you get to build-out's a build-out. Why wouldn't you want to know from the beginning what it looks like and get that picture of what the fiscal impact is through build-out? Once you get to build-out, you know what it is. So it's really kind of I think a very high-level analysis and doesn't take a look at what the true maybe costs or surpluses. I mean, there may even be surplus here. I don't know. But I think that at least that's the type of analysis I've been used to for a project of this size. And I understand some of your comments with regard to the commercial not being, well, actually it was commercial, it was removed by the applicant. But there, I think, is a benefit to having a look at it to see how does this thing look over time, rather than waiting to the end of the line and hope that the assumptions you've made bear true 20 years down the road. I mean, I think that I think there's much more benefit in that type of analysis. And
Yeah, I'll flip that on its head just a little bit. You keep referring to all the assumptions that we're making, and God knows there are a ton of assumptions built into this build-out analysis. You start getting into an annual cash flow analysis, and you're going to be compounding assumptions even further. And so I hear what you're saying. It's oftentimes for I don't want to use the term peace of mind, but to have a guess as to how it would look year to year. But when you get into a year-to-year analysis, I think you're guessing even more what the outcome is going to be than you are at build-out, number one. And number two, the result could show that there are annual surpluses rather than deficits. I mean, you know, we just talked about the 50-50 split with the county. I'm going to say it's more than a lag. We have indications from the county that is approximately where we're likely to end up. You know, so it's better than a complete guesstimate. But I think throwing in annual absorption assumptions and estimating how costs are going to react to that gets to be, you know, problematic.
Thank you.
difference of opinion.
Next, I'll discuss the public facilities financing plan. The objective of the PFFP is to illustrate how backbone infrastructure, public facilities, development impact fees, and school fees will be financed and funded, show that the Liberty Ranch project and ECU specific plan are considered feasible, and to strategize how one-time backbone costs will be funded. Net one-time project costs include backbone infrastructure and public facilities, city and CCSD development impact fees and school fees. Offsetting revenues against those costs are net bond proceeds collected from a CFD for backbone infrastructure and public facilities, owner equity contribution and credit reimbursements for backbone improvements from city fee programs, which were not part of the PFFP because they're to be determined. The facilities have not been designed yet, so we don't really know what those potential reimbursements would be at this time, so they weren't part of the feasibility analysis. The methods of measuring the feasibility for one-time cost burden is to measure the residential unit's cost burden as a percentage of the sales price of the home. The one-time cost burden for the residential units is within acceptable ranges, considered to be between 15 and 20%. I can tell you that the overall average for the project was at 17.1%, and that didn't include potential credit, so definitely within the range. And to measure the burden placed on residential units from ad valorem taxes and special taxes and assessments. Conclusions of the PFFP were one-time costs for Liberty Ranch project and the ECU specific plan are fully offset through owner equity contribution, infrastructure CFD net bond proceeds, and the one-time cost burden for all residential units within ranges are considered to be feasible. Overall, it concludes that given the costs and financing strategies outlined in the PFFP, the ECU plan is feasible. Now I'll turn it over to Dave with Goodwin.
me again, State Gutenberg, Consulting Group. Sorry. When you do that again.
Oh, you're right.
It's good.
I want to spend a little time, because I know we're really struggling to get out of here, just to talk about the peer review process just for a second, and then I'm going to blow through my slides because a lot of them are similar to what
Could you get a little closer to the mic?
Sure, sorry. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process and then try to speed through the slides because a lot of them are similar to what Eric just went over. So we got the initial drafts of the 4 reports, fiscal analysis for both Eastview and Liberty and a PFFP for both Eastview and Liberty in March. And by the time all was said and done, it was December. So this was a 9-month process of back and forth and addressing concerns, resolving issues, obtaining concessions, reaching compromise to get comfortable. I'll just kind of summarize it, to get comfortable with the conclusions. So we went through 4 iterations of the reports or analysis tables. We submitted formal comments, formal peer review comments, either via memo or email on all of those. We had many, many meetings. I know Sam has alluded to all the meetings he's been to. A good portion of those were with us. And by the time we got to December, I think we all felt on both sides that we had reached some conclusions that really made sense. I don't really need to say anything on this slide. I think it's been covered, and I mentioned the 50-50 split. I think there is a little bit of backup to that. The course could still change. And I also wanted to spend a little bit of time on kind of some of the revisions that occurred during that 9-month process. The initial set of documents didn't include an assessment of the impacts on the Culture and Rec Fund. We got that included. Eric mentioned deferred maintenance costs, both they relate to certain buildings, city buildings, as well as road maintenance. We had those added to the analysis. The initial analysis didn't involve accounting for the potential annexation into the CFD 2005-1 or something similar. There were a set of efficiency factors, fixed versus variable cost assumptions that were built into the analysis, and we've stripped most of those out. And we did talk just a little bit about sales tax a little while ago. There was an assumption that the capture rate would be a lot higher at the beginning, and by the time we were done talking, we had gotten that capture rate down quite a bit to something that we felt was more reflective of reality here in the city. This is just a different version of a slide that Eric had. It sort of summarizes the fiscal results for both Liberty Ranch and Eastview. About a $40 per unit surplus, annual surplus per unit for Liberty Ranch, about $80 per unit per year for Eastview. But built into those numbers is, as Eric characterized this, these additional expenses on average between the 2 analyses here of about $380,000 per year in expenses above what's in the 15-16 budget. Thank you, Cindy. And then with respect to the PFFP, I know you know what that is intended to do. Just to quantify, there's about $151 million worth of various costs, whether they're project-specific or even semi-regional costs or city or CCSD impact fees or school fees. And now let's talk a little bit about some of the changes that we went through on the peer review process for the PFFP as well. So initial analysis included a look just at the project build-out, and the more we talked about this with everyone at the table, the more we decided it would be very useful for us to understand not just the feasibility of both of these at build-out, but looking at phase 1 in particular. Because, as you know, oftentimes these big developments as they're phased, and I think Sam alluded to the fact that there may be 5 or so phases of roughly 300 units a phase, a lot of the infrastructure that's required to serve the entire development is needed up front, or at least in the early years of development. And so it makes the first phase or the first few phases a little more challenging in terms of financial feasibility. And so we wanted to not just understand the feasibility of the project when it's done, but can this project overcome those initial infrastructure hurdles? So we had them look at the feasibility of phase 1 as well. They laid out a matrix for funding all the infrastructure, so it clearly kind of shows the types of infrastructure that's required, the funding mechanisms that are intended to pay for all that. We had them develop that for us. Eric talked about the potential credits and reimbursements, and we had them, in calculating their feasibility, exclude those because, number one, we don't know when they're going to occur, and number two, when they do occur, it may be many years into the future and semi-worthless in terms of a present value perspective. And then finally, in doing the land-secured financing analysis, we sort of had them flip the priority from being one of infrastructure first and services second to services first, and addressing the city's ongoing operating budget needs first, and then whatever is left over, applying that to fund project infrastructure. And I think this is my last slide. This just shows the funding for phase 1 and Eastview in total, and you can see that the developer equity, which could be cash, it could be the payment of fees, that type of thing, is about 3/4 of the total in the first phase, and it's about 2/3 of the total by the time you're done building Eastview out. And unless there are any questions, we can move on.
Doesn't appear so.
So when you talk about the funding for facilities, when you talk about spending for facilities, is there room in that? I mean, if the elementary school district's saying that they need about $1.5 million, could that be added into the facility? Is there room in the facilities? I mean, if it's currently about 17%, if it was up to 19%, would there be enough there to assist the school district?
Eric gave you the number at build out. Those feasibility numbers for phase 1 are less attractive. They're 20%, 20% or even higher. So we would characterize that as feasible, but on the bubble, if you will, to use a March Madness term. That, coupled with the fact that the analysis is already being run at what we call an effective tax burden of 1.9%, so that's taking your property tax, your basic property tax, some other assessments and direct charges, CFD for services, whatever the project might have to pay to CCSD, and then adding the infrastructure component. That all of that annual burden that a homeowner would pay each year already equals 1.9% of the value of their home. And we started out at 1.8%. Because we felt that was a little more conservative and a little more in line with what we see in Northern California. But in talking with the group, we figured there was a little bit of room to push that to 1.9. So I would say, to summarize, that the only way, I think, to get some money to the school is to cut into the 1.9% that we're already using, which means the school gets some money, but the project gets less in terms of infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I had a question, if that's okay.
Jump in.
On the, and I'm just looking at the staff report, which I believe, and actually it's the executive summary, I guess, of the fiscal impact analysis on Eastview. It says that there's be a surplus of about $150,000 annually when you combine the general fund and the culture and recreation fund. And I know that the city attorney had talked to you or somebody, and there was an explanation that that reflected for purposes of the culture and recreation, because that is Fund 6, not normally something that I think we would include here, but it was representative of fees that would be paid or other costs associated with recreational activities.
Right, so if existing residents are paying for recreation services, or they're paying for other park and rec usage, we would expect that future residents in this project would do the same. So those are the types of revenues that are included in the fiscal analysis under the Culture and Rec Fund, Fund 6. The vast majority, I think it's 80% of the revenues in Fund 6 relate to the Galt market.
Right.
Those revenues are not included in the analysis because we don't see that those Galt market lease revenues are going to be affected one way or the other by new development.
Okay. And then under general fund, not general fund. And then the next line down, it talks about the gas tax for road maintenance, shows that there's going to be a deficit at build-out. How is that going to be offset through the CFD then?
Right, so what I think this table does is it shows the surplus to the general fund, there's a deficit to Fund 6, there's a deficit to the road fund, and then at the bottom there's a revenue line that relates to either 2005-1 or a similar CFD for services that would cover that sort of cumulative combined deficit.
So, if I'm getting this right, so we show a deficit, but we're using the CFD to offset the deficit in order to, well, I guess what I don't understand is we break it down, we break the project into two components, one general fund and then park and culture and recreation, but then we just show just the one fund, which is the road maintenance fund, showing a deficit. Are we saying that part of that's going to be offset by the general fund?
It depends on the direction that we go with how we mitigate these fiscal issues, and I think Steve was going to talk a little bit about that when he talks about CFD 2005-1 and the development agreement. The project had annexed in 2005-1, but that CFD is intended to fund public safety.
Correct.
Police and fire only. So if that ended up being the route that this project goes, that money would go into a fund that supports public safety, which would free up money in the general fund to deal with the road fund deficit.
But that's making an assumption, because the road maintenance, isn't that a general fund item?
I don't know. This is a general. No. It's part of the gas, and I think it is because I think it's subsidized by the general fund.
We are presently, gas taxes is another broken model. Both federal and state gas taxes are not funding adequate maintenance to keep our roads in a fair to good condition. We currently, citywide average, we're at fair, but we're only funding half of what it would take to keep them in that condition. So we've recognized, they said, well, we'll take your current budget and we'll project that forward onto the new residents. And we said, well, we don't have enough, so just taking the current base and doing more of it means we're going to have an even bigger shortfall. And the developer and their consultants agreed that that was problematic, and so they built into the model a need to assess, an assessment of sorts, through whatever mechanism we use, to make up that shortfall, not to fix the whole city, but to make sure that the new Eastview area had enough revenue generated to keep their roads in a fair to good condition. And so that's that plug number. Now you get into a little bit of a shell game of where you collect it and how it gets earmarked for roads, and that becomes a budget.
So if I could just finish my thought, because the alternative to annexing into 2005-1 that we've talked a little bit about is to
Form a new one.
Is do a new CFD.
Right.
And that new CFD would be established to have a lot more flexibility than the existing CFD. And one of the things that would be earmarked to do would be road maintenance. So that would address the specific road fund issue.
Does that answer your question, sir? Good.
Yes.
All right. Any further questions from council? Given the time, I have two public speakers that I'd like to have pulled forward before we go any further. If council's okay with that. Jim Clausen.
I was going to start off by saying good afternoon, but I guess we'll start with good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I was a little disappointed to see that this workshop was just for council, but the public really didn't get to ask any questions. We were just sitting out there listening to everything, and I had hoped that we would have an opportunity to ask questions along the way. The developer has said they want to build a quality project in Galt. I've heard that before when I worked for the building department, and we saw some projects they were proposing to come in with that didn't really quite seem to fit into Galt. So I'm asking, if he wants to build a quality project, why doesn't he follow the general plan? We spent a lot of time, council, staff, putting that together, and now he wants to come in with 43% of his proposed project under 6,500 square feet. We're not talking 10%, we're not talking a few here. That's 43% of his project. A lot of times the developer will say, well, it works out best because it will pencil in, which means you can make a little more money. I'm no offense, Sam, but you're in the business for making money. And then he talks about also that there's a brochure online through Galt, and it talks about all the different types of houses they build. Some of the houses were saying wood siding, and there was a number of the houses that said composition roof, not a tile roof. We're going back to the comp roofs. Again, I don't think that reflects onto a quality project here in Galt. And lastly, I really would like for the council to be very careful and read the development agreement closely. You would almost think that parts of that were written by the developer, because it sure offers a lot of benefits for the developer instead of saving money for the city. So the bottom line is, I think if we have a developer coming to our town wanting to build a quality product, we hand them the books on parks, we hand them the books on general plan, and say, here's what you need to follow. Not be told how we're going to change our zonings, how we're going to change our it's right there in the book. It's not easy, to make a mistake if you just follow what's there. And the council before you put a lot of time and effort into making sure our community would have a certain appeal. And then to go with something that isn't being our minimum guidelines, I don't think we need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. Janice Clausen.
How are you guys today? One of my things I wrote, I have to say that I didn't talk with him with what I did, and I'm saying some of the same things, because I really think that the general plan is something that we should go with. I mean, like he said, that you did a lot, and a lot of spots have been done. But I know this developer has put a lot of time and effort into doing this to get this done. But I do believe, too, that he needs to understand that he's coming to our city, and we already have what we want our city to be like. And then maybe the city needs to ask this developer to go back to the drawing board and come up with a plan that has homes of 6,500 square foot lots. And then staff, whenever they're working closely with this developer, I think they have the responsibility to advise that developer that this is how our general plan is, and not say, okay, we're going to, we need to understand that they work for us. They don't work for him. And amending the general plan every time that a developer comes to town, it's not good. Because after a while, then every developer comes is going to change it. And pretty soon, we're not going to have that general plan that we had done, because we've paved everyone to come in and say, well, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I would like the council to not approve this plan as it is, because I don't think it's a good plan with the way it's going. The plan needs to be revised to adhere to our general plan with no amendments. We are wanting to upgrade our town, not to downgrade it. And the one thing that I wanted to bring up also, this is on my list, that you council asked about the planning commission whenever they made the recommendation for you to do this. I went and sat at both days as far as their plan. The first day, it was really good. They asked questions. When we went the second time, one of the planning commissioners said, hey, I've had enough, I don't want to discuss this anymore, let's vote. They didn't even go over the development agreement. They didn't go over half the things. They let the schools speak a small amount, but that was it. And I just really think that they were overwhelmed as far as this agreement and did not know even how to recommend this to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, can you get at least one more in 10 minutes, or do we need to continue this?
Well, I don't think we should start the development agreement with 10 minutes to go. What I would suggest, and I think that's essentially our last topic. I have a few comments on the CFD, but the DA is really it. So we could go to sometime next week, or we could go to a time before the next city council meeting. Probably within an hour we can close out the DA. So I think that's the amount of time that we're looking for, unless Tony or the manager have other topics they wanted to cover.
Okay, the date of Tuesday the 29th was mentioned. Is council okay with that?
So probably, maybe we could do 4 o'clock.
Are you okay on that end?
Well, yeah, I can make it, but I mean, members of the public don't, it's not real convenient for them.
The other option would be to go to the council date and start at 4 or 5 o'clock on the council day and get it done then, and then take a break.
No, I don't want to do that.
I'd like to have it separate as well.
Okay.
I'm good with the 29th, I just,
Timeline?
question is what, I mean, I hear Councilman Campion, I mean, we schedule this as a study session, and realizing that we do need, at some point, need to have opportunity for the community to weigh in. The 29th is open, do it whatever time.
So I'd recommend you entertain a motion to continue this meeting till Tuesday the 29th at 4 p.m. if that's the time you wish to.
Do you have a motion to that?
So moved.
I have a motion by Vice Mayor Kane. Do I have a second? Second by Councilmember Powers. Call for the vote, please.
Vice Mayor Kane?
Aye.
Councilmember Ewers?
Aye.
Councilmember Campion?
I will be there.
Councilmember Powers?
Aye.
Mayor Coogan?
Aye, I'm assuming that's a sending vote. Councilmember Campion? Okay,
I said I'd be there.
okay.
2 hours, or what are you anticipating?
Yeah, I would say outside is, outside, so 4 to 6, right?
I have responsibility.
Right.
And we will absolutely make it 4 to 6. With that, this meeting is adjourned.
Fine, though.